Xbox On. Welcome to Xbox On, a podcast with one host about one console, Xbox. I'm said host Jesse DeRosa, and on today's episode, we'll be talking about the latest Xbox news for the week of May 11th, 2023, including Phil Spencer had an extremely candid interview with Kinda Funny last week and went through everything that went wrong with Redfall, Xbox's Woes, and the future of the brand overall. And we're going to do a deep dive into all of that today and more. On this day in Xbox history, in the year 2010, 13 years ago, Lost Planet 2 was released for the Xbox 360. I only ever played the demo for Lost Planet 1. I remember liking it a lot as a kid, but also not really having a full grasp over what it was. In hindsight, I kind of think of it as like sci-fi Monster Hunter. I mean, it was a Capcom game, but it wasn't very Monster Hunter. It had Monster Hunter like elements. I know it had like a large emphasis on big boss fights, but there was also like guns and mech suits and more exploration. Lost Planet is a cool game. I know it's one of those franchises where it's like not a whole lot of people, by today's standards, like a successful game kind of thing, where not a lot of people quote unquote played it or experienced it back in the day, but those who did swear by what a great series this was. I know there were 3 of them. I think 1 and 2 are considered largely the better ones, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I don't have a lot of experience with Lost Planet. It's kind of on that list of like games from that era I probably would have played if I wasn't too busy being 13 years old with no source of income. But I know it's a loved franchise nonetheless. So shout out to Lost Planet. Obviously did well enough, that I got a couple sequels. But yeah, I feel like that's something that Capcom could probably bring back today and find success in. But Capcom's doing so well right now. I mean, I guess what incentive do they, maybe they can save that for when they're running out of steam, is go to the well of Lost Planet. But nonetheless, an important game to the history of the Xbox 360, no doubt. The only Xbox console where the whole world seems to agree was unabashedly a good console. As we watch Xbox Series S and X start to decline into the same state, or at least the same perceived state that the Xbox One found itself in. Guys, starting off this week really grim because, well, hey, that's how Papa Phil Spencer's kind of behaving right now. So why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we have the same kind of head on our shoulders, the same attitude, the sullen outlook on the future of our brand, our green, mean, most powerful machine, the Xbox? No, that's a little bit of humor, but guys, I'm very excited about this week. Actually, I'm a little disappointed. I'm excited because the news we had to talk about is so fun, but I'm a little disappointed because in usual Xbox On fashion, the biggest, most exciting news happened like 12 hours after I finished making the podcast. So yeah, last Thursday, just hours after the podcast went up for all you guys to listen to, Phil Spencer was on a very tell-all, very very big interview with Kinda Funny that I'm sure if you're even remotely an Xbox fan, you've probably heard about this by now. You've probably seen clips of it or watched it yourself or heard another podcast where they discussed it. So yeah, it's kind of old news at this point. We're about a week out from when this happened, but it's just kind of sometimes what happens. You put your podcast out and then the next morning, late breaking news. It's kind of the nature of the beast. I've thought about shifting Xbox On to maybe release on Fridays, record it Thursdays, but then we would just get big Friday news every week. I feel like it's just the situation. The problem's going to follow me wherever I go. The only way out would be if I recorded the podcast on Saturdays and then it went live on Sundays, because the only time you're ever getting Xbox news on a Sunday is when they do their summer showcase event, which is just always on like the first or second Sunday of June. But you can plan around and schedule for that one. But anyway, it's not going to happen. I'm not going to sacrifice my Saturday nights, the one and only night of the week where I have the ability to stay up late and play video games, to stay up late and talk about video games. It just seems counterproductive if you're being selfish and not thinking about the growth of your podcast and purely thinking about wanting to have a good time. Guys, this isn't relevant. No one cares. All right, it's Xbox On. It's a podcast about Xbox. If you're still listening, then hey, we're going to talk about Xbox ad nauseum today. But first, before we get into the Phil Spencer interview, before we get into deeper impressions on Redfall, which I've played a ton of this week, we're going to first talk about the notable game releases coming out this week. The big one for Xbox, I would say, is Weird West. I've seen a lot of a marketing push for this one. It's going to be a day one Game Pass title, so that's probably why I'm seeing a lot of marketing push for it. But yeah, at the time this podcast is up, the game's already been on Game Pass a couple days. It's out. You can go play it. It's like a top-down-esque third-person perspective twin stick RPG Wild West shooter twin stick type game that actually looks really good. It reminds me a lot of that other Game Pass twin stick cowboy shooter that this game is not apparently related to, but it looks kind of like it. But anyway, this game is apparently really good. People are saying it's a pretty good time. I don't know when I'll get around to it. I would like to try this game, but I got some other things on my plate right now. But Weird West, shout out to you, developed by Wolfeye Studios. Actually, interestingly enough, apparently there's some ex-Arcane Studios talent who worked on this game. So, hey, look at that. People who worked on Prey and Dishonored ended up working on this instead of Redfall to some extent. So, there you go. Yeah, that game's out. I know people are excited about that, so pretty nice get for Game Pass there. Also, if you are still on the Xbox One ecosystem, you don't have a Series S or X, Marvel's Midnight Suns is officially out this week. I think Hogwarts Legacy is now out on Xbox One as well. God bless you if you're going to try to play that thing on an Xbox One. But yeah, so you can pick up those games. Just listen, man. Just Venmo me if cash is tight. Let's get you a Series S. Come on, man. We gotta get off the Xbox One. They just run like shit. I mean, maybe if you have like an Xbox One X, maybe you're okay. I don't know. I never had a One X. I just held on to my day one VCR Xbox One with Kinect from 2013 until the Series X came out. So I don't know, but man, I can't imagine trying to run some of these current games that are coming out on my old VCR Xbox. In fact, I know how badly that goes because my old Xbox One is a glorified YouTube Netflix player in my bedroom, and one time I tried to play Sonic Frontiers on it, and it did not go well. So anyway, last one, I guess this is, this is definitely not an Xbox game. This has nothing to do with Xbox, but I'm going to give it a shout out nonetheless because, like I've said in the past, I think everyone can kind of understand where, I know you get this. If you're listening to this podcast, I know you get where I'm coming from. Everyone cuts their teeth on Nintendo growing up as a gamer. So whether you play Nintendo to this day or you don't, I know at one point at least Nintendo was a part of your life. So shout out to Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. It's no doubt not only the biggest game coming out this week, but it's definitely one of the top 5 biggest games of the year. Probably going to end up being one of the top 3 biggest games of the year. I mean, when all is said and done, the big games this year are going to be, well, what? It's going to be Zelda, Harry Potter, Starfield, and Spider-Man. So, there's one, and then maybe Jedi's Fallen Orders of Survivors. So there you go, a couple of multiplats, and then a big game from each of the big 3 players. So, hey, everyone gets a little bit of representation. There you go. And then they'll all get outsold by whatever fucking Call of Duty atrocity Sledgehammer slaps together by November 10th. So, hey, there you go. But no, shout out to Zelda. I know a lot of people I have no interest in playing this game personally. I played Breath of the Wild. I put 50, 60 hours into it when the Switch first came out. I enjoyed Breath of the Wild. I think it is technically a good game. I did enjoy it. It was fun. I see a lot of the appeal. I also think the game is absurdly overrated. And while I can accept the reality where this is what Zelda is like, I would just also prefer for there to be an alternative option where I could play my Skyward Sword, Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker style Zelda games, because that's the Zelda that I just very much enjoy and prefer. But nonetheless, even though it's not for me, doesn't matter what I think. The overwhelming majority of people are going to probably play this game, love this game. I'm sure it will get out overwhelmingly positive reviews. It'll probably get a 10 out of 10 from every fucking critic who touches it, and doesn't matter. People will love it. It's going to be a good time. So shout out to all of you if this week you're looking forward to playing some Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. What a fucking terrible name for a game. But I'm sure it's good. All right, Activision update. God, I was literally just trying to be positive and just like give a shout out to people looking forward to that game, and I ended up coming off, I think, as like an as like a forced excuse to like rag on people. I don't mean it that way. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, excited Zelda fans. Please know I am happy for you as I sit here and play my broken Redfall. All right. Activision updates, guys. Let's talk about our updates pertaining to the Activision Blizzard deal. Hey, we got 3 of them this week, but it's kind of fun because it's not the usual, like, Bobby Kotick stopped touching women and harassing people of color for 5 seconds to make a statement. Instead, we're going to have some interesting comments. We got the CEO of EA Games commenting on the deal. We got some info pertaining to possibly the European Union approving the deal. So some fun updates in updates that are actually interesting to hear about and not just necessary for us to go over. So let's start off with that bigger one, the EU possibly approving the deal. So this report came as of the day I'm recording this from Reuters. I always thought it was pronounced Reuters, so that's what I'm going to call it. I don't care. But they did some good reporting where they said that, quote, the EU antitrust regulators are set to approve Microsoft's $69 billion acquisition of Activision next week, with May 15th as the likeliest date. People familiar with the matter have said. The EU antitrust enforcer is expected to clear the acquisition for Microsoft after they agreed to licensing deals with cloud streaming rivals like NVIDIA, Ukraine's Boostroid, Japan's Ubitus. Other people with direct knowledge of the matter have told Reuters back in March. So keep in mind, that's a big thing. Told Reuters back in March. This information is a couple months old, but as of March, it seems like they were pretty gung-ho or ready to, give the stamp of approval. The agreement also says that with Nintendo, Microsoft will bring Activision's Call of Duty franchise to Nintendo's platform. Should the acquisition go through, also U.S. distributor Valve Corporation, owner of the world's largest video game distribution platform, Steam, declined a contract saying that they trust Microsoft, which you might remember that story from some point last year. The commission, which has set a May 22nd deadline for its decision, declined to comment on the reporting. So they have till, this is it, the European Union, the other big regulatory body they're dealing with over in Europe, basically has until May 22nd to make a final verdict. And this report, as of March, says that they're ready to put their stamp of approval on the deal as early as the 15th. So a whole week before they have to make a decision, they're basically planning on saying, yeah, we approve it. Let's be done with this. So obviously a lot can change between March and May. And a lot has changed because we've seen the CMA straight up deny the deal, and that could have serious consequences. This could really push other regulatory bodies to double check and consider, what they've rendered as a verdict, and maybe makes it a little harder. So it is possible the EU still says no to this, but if nothing has really changed since then, it seems like the European Union is going to approve this deal in just a few days. So what is the 15th is Monday. So by Monday, we might hear of an approval on this deal from the EU. And honestly, not like I've ever known what was going on with this deal from any point in the beginning up until now, because I'm not a legal expert. I don't know any of this shit, nor does really anyone who's trying to cover it. But, you can imagine if this goes through the EU and then it gets through the FTC here in the States, and then it's really just the CMA over in the UK kind of gunking up the deal, then, I mean, you got to wonder, like, what's going to happen? Do they end up getting Activision and then, our poor friends across the pond end up suffering by getting some gimped version of Game Pass where they pay just as much as we do, but they get fewer games because they don't own Activision in that market or something? Like, how does this end up working? So it'll be really, I'll be really curious to see how this goes. I guess that's like my number one question, is what that means for the CMA if this deal ends up getting approved by the other two. Because remember, the big players were they need to get approved by the CMA, which is basically the UK governing board or regulatory board, the EU, which is the more broader European board, and then the FTC here in the US. And those were the 3 obstacles they had to get over before this deal was basically done. And the CMA shot them in it kind of kneecapped this whole deal a few weeks back, but we might get the approval from the other 2 bodies, which are, I don't mean this in a mean way, frankly more important because they represent a larger and more important sector of the economy, so of the global economy. So I don't know. I wonder what that means for this deal. Should it get approved at the end of the day by everybody except one body, which is a pretty important one, but not the most important one in terms of like trying to get everyone on board. So does that kind of strong arm the CMA in this process of appeals that Activision and Microsoft are going through, or does it end up, the deal goes through and then Activision is recognized as a own subsidiary of Microsoft in all parts of the world except the UK, where they have to operate as like some kind of spin-off brand that has licensing agreements from an Activision owned by Microsoft everywhere else in the world except in the UK. And it's like, it's such a messy situation. I just feel like Microsoft and Activision are not going to let this thing go. So if the other regulatory boards at this point in time are willing to give the green light and let this thing go through, I feel like that puts the CMA in more of a position than it puts Microsoft and Activision, if that makes sense. So again, not that I know, this is all just gut feeling and complete ignorance, but it makes you wonder. Our second update here is that Microsoft has reportedly hired a lawyer known for reportedly defeating the EU regulator in competition cases as it prepares to appeal to UK's regulatory decisions after they blocked the deal. So speaking of the CMA, and as reported by The Telegraph via Yahoo Finance, the company has now hired Daniel Beard, KC, and plans to lodge an appeal at the UK's Competition Appeal Tribunal in a matter of days. Beard, who is described, and so I wonder, a side note, if they have intel, suggesting that this deal is about to go through in the EU in the next couple days, could this be a strategic launch for their appeal process with the UK to try and get this going in the next couple days? Who knows? A little tinfoil hat maybe. But Beard, who is described in the article as a leading competition barrister is how you say it, has a reputation for overturning large-scale decisions made by the EU regulator. He has represented Apple in the EU after the EU demanded the company pay €13 billion in taxes because it claimed that Ireland had offered it illegal state aid. Apple went on to win the appeal. He also represented Intel last year in a successful attempt to overturn a decade-old €1.1 billion fine after the EU claimed that it was unfairly dominating the microchip market. Microsoft now hopes that Beard will be similarly successful in appealing the CMA's decision to block the company's $69 billion acquisition of Activision Blizzard. So he's got a good track record. Let's see how it goes. Here we are all on the sidelines cheering for the lawyer and the big corporation to beat out the government. But that's what's come to here in 2023. Your ancestors would be proud of you. The corporations won. All right, so there's that. And then finally, our last update, and this is the most fun one because it's all in the industry. Nothing legal about it. It's just gaming people talking to gaming people. From VGC, Electronic Arts CEO has said that the company is, quote, indifferent as to whether Microsoft's proposed deal with Activision Blizzard is successful or not. In a Q&A following the company's latest earnings call this past week, Andrew Wilson, CEO of EA, said, or was asked what he thinks about the implications of the deal and what they are for the video game industry and for future consolidation, to which he says, quote, "This is a question I get asked a lot. I almost am never allowed to answer the question either, as it turns out. What I would say is I don't know what's going to happen to Activision and Microsoft. Again, we continue to be Microsoft's biggest partner, and I think we're number one publisher on their platform. So whether the deal goes through or not is not really material to us broadly. We think that we have a scale with our network and our IP and our talent to continue to navigate the future and lead the future of entertainment and compete in the market regardless of whether the deal goes through or not." Wilson also suggests that further industry mergers are inevitable and that he wants EA to be in a good position should it ever be involved in one. Quote, "Long term, will the industry be consolidating or will there ever be a broader entertainment consolidation? If I was predicting over the future long term, I would say that there's almost certainty at some level," he explained. "I would love for us to be able to scale to a meaningful consolidator in that space." Let me read that again. That's crazy. "I would love for us to have the scale to be a meaningful consolidator in that space. I think that we have tremendous assets with respect to the future of the entertainment, but as it stands today, I think that we're indifferent as to whether Microsoft's Activision deal goes through or not. We feel like we have an incredible strategy. We feel like we have incredible opportunity, and whether that goes through or not, we continue to be the number one publisher for Microsoft's platform." Okay, so let me just reiterate. So someone asked Andrew Wilson, the CEO of EA Games, what do you think about the Microsoft Activision deal? And his response is essentially, I get asked this all the time, and I'm generally not allowed to answer to it, but here we go. Because on a Q&A during an earnings call, during like a fiscal quarter earnings call with investors, the corporation is not allowed to lie. It's actual like a legalities thing. Like these are your investors. These are people who fund your company. You cannot lie. So if they ask, you either have to have a really good PR way to kind of say what you got to say without saying what you want to say or should say, or you got to tell the dead honest truth. So he's kind of put on a spot here, asked a question by some shareholder that made it, put him in a legal situation where he had to say something. So we're lucky that this question was asked, because that's how we get the quote to begin with. So with that out of the way, you got to understand his target audience. He's clearly talking to investors. So again, he's trying to strengthen the image and the appeal of EA and instill confidence in investors to keep the company healthy and well financed. But also, this isn't the first time we've seen Andrew Wilson kind of, pucker his lips and bat his eyes and go, we are open to someone offering us $69 billion and purchasing EA. What do you guys think Battlefield and some broken Star Wars games are worth? What do you guys say? Oh, we got a Titanfall IP we refuse to use. You want to buy us? Well, you like football? You got John Madden. He's dead, but his games are doing well. So that was kind of his response last time. And now he's using this question about what do you think? Because as gamers, I think we all kind of understand, like there's always been kind of a parity with certain players in the space, right? You kind of think about Microsoft. It's like, what's the yin and yang with Microsoft? It's Microsoft and PlayStation, right? Sony, Microsoft, Xbox, PlayStation, right? And then the yin and yang among the publishers. There's always been like a Activision, EA kind of yin and yang, where they're both these big West Coast American publishers that are deep rooted back from the old arcade days. They're really well known for their sports franchises and their first person shooters, and they're an unapologetically American publisher, annualized franchises, things like that. There's a lot of similarity. There's a lot of continuity kind of in the EA versus Activision realm, and people often relegate in our world of people constantly having to align themselves with a corporation or a brand or an identity or a color scheme, just like people choose McDonald's or Burger King over, one or the other, Apple versus Android. There has always seemed to be a little bit of like even if it's more of like an undertone, something that doesn't get discussed a whole lot, a kind of Activision EA parallel, where it's like, are you Battlefield or are you Call of Duty? Are you fucking like Tony Hawk and shit like that, or are you SSX? Those kinds of things. Where regardless, like, there's a parity, and it seems here like what Andrew Wilson's saying is like, hey, it seems like this deal might not go through, but you know what? We're your biggest partner, Xbox. We of all the publishers that put games on your platform, we sell the most copies. We make the most money off microtransactions. Like, we're a really important part of your brand. Hey, remember, EA Play is a part of Game Pass Ultimate. We made that deal with you. We've always been good partners. We've had a long legacy together, a long relationship together. So, if that deal doesn't go through with Activision, maybe you want to knock on our door and see if you can buy us. Maybe regulators will let you buy us, since Battlefield doesn't have the same kind of cultural dominance that Call of Duty has. What do you say? That is the only way really I can read this response. Is it's like, yeah, I could comment on what I think about Microsoft, a company we have a long-lasting relationship with, not trying to court us and acquire us, but going out of left field and jumping on Activision, a company that they actually have lost their long-standing good relationship with to some extent, because, ever since the PS4 era, Activision's been in bed with Sony with marketing deals for Call of Duty and Destiny and things like that. So if anything, EA could have used this as an excuse to be like, yeah, we're a little hurt by Microsoft. We've been a long-standing partner with them. We're their number one publishing partner on their platform as far as third parties are concerned. And, we got a lot of deals together, but they went after Activision, which is like our biggest competitor, instead of us. And no, he didn't do that. He's basically just like, hey, heard that deal might not go through. Just want to let you know, you might even be able to get us with less regulatory scrutiny and fewer concessions, and maybe even less than $69 billion, because we don't have Call of Duty. And that's kind of how this reads. It's like, hey, you won't get a COD every year on Game Pass, but you will get Madden and whatever the new FIFA game is going to be called now that doesn't get the FIFA brand. And hey, you can have a bunch of non-existent Titanfall sequels and make buku bucks off Apex Legends. What do you say? So I thought that was a really compelling and interesting quote from Andrew Ryan, because there's just so much we can glean on from it. It's the first time we've had some kind of update in regards to this deal, or some conversation surrounding this deal in a while that's just been like pure dumb fun, and also something I feel like I can actually speak to, instead of just being like, well, the lawyers have terms and clauses that they have to abide by in an effort to adjunct. So it's nice. It's nice to have something fun to talk about with this deal. But yeah, Andrew, I always keep almost saying Andrew Ryan. This is not BioShock. Andrew Wilson, you sly dog. No one wants to buy you. Also, it's kind of gross. He's kind of like championing further consolidation of the market. I understand. That's like how you win the game of capitalism. It's like start from nothing, build an empire, crush everyone around you, make the world objectively a worse place for the workers in exchange for a slight consumer convenience like Prime shipping, and then grow to the point where you can just sell the business off to someone else and just maybe get an island like Epstein or something like that. That's kind of like the name of the game. So it seems like Wilson's like, hey, I'm ready for my $69 billion too. But nonetheless, let's move on. Fun little anecdote there, to a little story, a little something to whet your appetite with while we wait to get to these Phil Spencer quotes in the main news. Guys, that's it for the Activision Microsoft deal stuff. Let's go on to our stories of mild amusement updates from last week. We got a couple quick ones, but interesting ones here as well. Guys, you know how the Xbox Series S and X have this silly proprietary expansion system for additional storage, and it kind of sucks, but it's kind of cool because the cards are really slim and it's really easy to just slot it in. And it's kind of awesome, but it also kind of sucks because it's expensive. Well, good news. Seagate has officially dropped the price of its Xbox Series S and X storage expansion cards this past week. The Twitter account for Xbox notified players that the price cuts, which unfortunately have only appeared to be affecting the U.S. buyers, but will hopefully soon expand, are official and effective immediately going into effect. So it's a bad sentence, but anyway, Xbox Series X and S, which launched back in 2020 with a 1 terabyte Seagate expansion card, priced at $219.99, was later joined by a 512 gigabyte card for $139.99 and a 2 terabyte card for $399.99 in late 2021. Well, now those prices have been adjusted as follows. The 512 gigabyte card has gone from about $140 to $90. The 1 terabyte card, so about $50 savings. The 1 terabyte card has gone from $220 to $150, so a $70 savings, pretty substantial. And then the 2 terabyte card that was $400 has now gone down to $280, $120 difference in price. So don't get me wrong, $90 for half a terabyte of expansion storage is still pricey as hell. I think back in 2014, I bought an external 2 terabyte standard hard drive for my Xbox One at Best Buy, and I paid like $60-$70 for it. So yeah, I mean, like, it's definitely expensive as hell. I get it. Listen, it's NVMe SSD card, microchip, whatever. It's different. The technology is different. It's a lot more it's a lot faster. It's a lot more advanced. It's a lot more low profile and cool. You're definitely paying for some extra. So I don't have a problem with these cards being, slightly more expensive than your average SSD, because you are paying for that form factor and that proprietary tech. But I mean, at the end of the day, $90 in 2023 for half a terabyte of storage is still a lot of money. Like, I'd like to see that number get closer to like $50 if possible, at least. And then see that 1 terabyte card, again, $150. It's a lot more, appealing than $220. But I'd like to see us get that number a little closer, like $100 if we can. But this is a step in the right direction. Very exciting nonetheless. And hopefully this lowers the barrier to entry for some more gamers, so we can get more people expanding their storage. I keep seeing that. I don't know if you guys seen on like Twitter and stuff that like new meme structure for Xbox, where people are like, here's what my Xbox Series S can hold, because Series S only has half a terabyte of storage on it to begin with. I think after the OS, it only has about 400 gigs really. But it's like the meme where people will put like 2 games that take up almost the entire hard drive on their Xbox, and it's always like a Call of Duty game, and then like paired with like Destiny or something like that. That's just like 2 games as a service type games that are like 200 gigs each. And yeah, it's ridiculous. People need to be able to expand the storage, especially because these consoles come with way less storage than they should, and these games take up way much more space than, I don't know if maybe they should is the right thing to say about that, because I don't know how hard it is to consolidate these files and get them down to a respectable file size. But if a game is averaging around 100 gigabytes per install, maybe Xbox, PlayStation, maybe you guys need to figure out how to get more storage into these boxes and make adding storage down the road a little more affordable. But as a closing statement to this story, Also important to keep in mind, last month there was a leak on, I think it was on Best Buy listing that was leaked and then pulled down, where it showed that Western Digital, basically Seagate's arch nemesis, the other big external storage manufacturer, there was a listing for their version of one of these proprietary Xbox expansion cards. It was a 1 terabyte Western Digital expansion card for Series S and X. It appeared on BestBuy.com. There was a I can't remember what it was. I think it was like a reduced price. It was like 20-30% cheaper than the Seagate price. So hopefully, that listing was pulled, but hopefully we get the announcement soon that those are real. They're coming. Obviously it's real. If it was on BestBuy.com, it is real, but hopefully we get the word soon that they are coming out sooner rather than later, and then some more competition can help drive the prices further down as time goes on. Because honestly, I'll speak for myself. Like, I'm not paying this money for an expansion. Like, I don't need the 2 terabyte. I'd like to at least get a 1 terabyte. 512 gigs is way too small, but I'm not paying $150 for 1 more terabyte on my console. I'm just not doing that. So I would love to expand. I'm just waiting for that price to go down. And in the meantime, I will just fucking uninstall and shift around games on external hard drives and do whatever kind of trickery I got to do to get my games loaded on my console. But this has got to get worked on, guys. Come on. All right. Next up, let's talk about Private Division. This is a really weird one. It's a odd match. Kind of like how Wild Hearts had the Tecmo guys with EA. We're going to see something kind of like that in a little bit with this story where it's just an unlikely pairing. So from VGC, Take-Two publisher label Private Division. As a reminder, Private Division is basically Take-Two's like smaller label publisher. Like it's Take-Two, the guys that do like Rockstar games like GTA, but it's like a second publisher that's under Take-Two for like smaller games that they don't necessarily want to align with the Take-Two branding. And so Private Division's done games like Outer Worlds before Microsoft bought Obsidian. So for reference, they've worked on some pretty notable games, but Private Division, the publisher, has signed on to a new action adventure IP to work game with developer Game Freak of all teams. Codenamed Project Bloom, the title is expected to be released during Take-Two's fiscal year 26, which ends in March of 2026. So by about 3 years from now, we should see this game come out. The first piece of the concept art of the game, which is in early development, has been shown online. I actually haven't looked at it, so it's the bad on me for not being prepared. But founded in 1989, this Japanese studio, Game Freak, best known for the creation of over 30 entries in the Pokemon franchise, they spoke out on the deal and said the following quote: "We're thrilled to have the opportunity to create new IP that is bold and totally different from our prior work," said Game Freak director Kota Furushima. Quote, from the beginning, Private Division was the publisher we wanted to work with on our new game. Yeah, right. The track record and global expertise gives us all the confidence to create a sweeping new action-adventure game that we can't wait to see and share more about in the future. Another quote from a different source, "We're ready to help Game Freak unleash their potential, and we're honored to be the first Western publisher to work alongside this exceptionally talented and proven team to bring a bold new IP to market," said Private Division head and Take-Two chief strategy officer Michael Woes. Woes is, you got to work on that spelling of the last name, man. Maybe go back in time and strangle someone. I don't know. Anyway, end quote. "A decade ago, Game Freak set up an internal initiative called Gear Project, in which developers could pitch original game ideas during their quieter periods when Pokemon games were in such an active development state. In the earlier kind of phases of Pokemon development. Although the studio is best known for the Pokemon series, it has released a number of smaller games unrelated to Pokemon in recent history, about the past 10 years or so, like Harmonite, I don't know what that is. Tembo the Badass Elephant, I remember that. That was a Wii eShop. That was either a Wii U eShop or I think it was 3DS eShop, actually. And then it came to Xbox Arcade, actually. Yeah, it was an Xbox like indie game at one point. And Giga Wrecker. So they've worked on smaller games. We're talking about like kind of like indie style 2D projects. They've never, as far as like large scale full AAA type games, they've only ever made Pokemon. So this is a big deal. They're not working with Nintendo. They're not working with another Japanese label. They're working with Private Division. It's so funny when they're like, when the quote from Game Freak says, "From the beginning, Private Division was the publisher we wanted to work with on our new game." You could tell it's just one of those like Japanese things that was poorly translated, because what the fuck does that what does that even mean? Yeah, oh man, from the get, I always knew I wanted to work for Private Division. I always said if we make it big and we get to work with a big American publisher, we wanted to work with private division. So I just think that's funny right there. But no, this is obviously crazy, man. Like, we're seeing, they're calling it a new action adventure IP. So from the people that make you bring you Pokemon, we're getting a new game published by a subsidiary of the publisher that brings you Grand Theft Auto, and the publisher of games like Outer Worlds. And yeah, we're gonna get a new action adventure IP from the Pokemon developers. So I think this is such a funny, like, no one would have had this on their bingo card kind of pairing. And it's fun, it's cool, like, right? Like, I actually really encourage and look forward to seeing more and more of this, like, Japanese publishers on Western games, or Japanese games with Western publishers, and just kind of seeing, like, these different combinations, like, even if it doesn't always work out. I know when, like, Crystal Dynamics was owned by Square Enix, that wasn't necessarily seen as the best fit, or, fucking Remedy working with Smilegate on Crossfire X. I know, there's not always a great history with these crossovers, but you get your wild hearts when you get, like, your Koei Tecmo guys working with EA. So it can happen. It can happen when you get this bleeding of two different worlds, where you get something really unique and really different, because you got, like, this publisher with this Western sensibility, knowing kind of what these big AAA action, kind of dominant, generally multiplayer-centric game experiences are like, and then they kind of work with the more, and I mean this in the most complimentary way, like, eccentric and unique and, like, quirky Japanese developers to make something that's just so not just another Call of Duty or Gears of War like game. So it's cool. It's really cool to see these combinations kind of become a reality, and then at the end of it, we get a game unlike anything we've ever seen before. So I'm definitely going to keep my eyes on this, because although obviously we don't really know anything about the game or have anything to go off as to whether or not it's going to be good, it is an interesting matchup, and therefore on that alone, I'm just looking forward to seeing whatever the hell this game ends up becoming. So that's cool. From the people who brought you Pokemon, we're going to get some kind of new game on Xbox, presumably in the next couple of years. It's like a action-adventure game. All right. And finally, before we get into the main news, let's wrap up with what seems to be like our monthly or quarterly update on Dragon Age Dreadwolf, a game that I have no beef with Dragon Age as a franchise. I'm just so tired of this game always being in the news cycle, despite the fact that it's never been properly, like, shown or revealed with a full-blown trailer and gameplay. Like, come fuck on, man. It's like, I don't need Xbox constantly teasing me about this Indiana Jones game that, like, there's nothing to show yet, like, just shut the fuck up until the game's ready to go. That's my thing with Dragon Age. But it always shows up, a couple times a year. It always shows up in the news, and they're talking about some bullshit that's like, great, now go away. And this week is no different, because, here we go, from VGC, Dragon Age Dreadwolf isn't currently scheduled for release before April 2024. That's according to publisher EA. So on their investor call that took place this week, we learned that the game's not planned to be released in fiscal year 24, and fiscal year 24 for EA ends on March 31st, 2024. So about a year from now, roughly a year from now, 10 months from now. So there's no plan for Dragon Age Dreadwolf to release. Basically what that means is this year or early next year. And those are prime times to release a game like this, because we all know the end of the year and the beginning of the year are the two busiest times for game releases. So, I mean, disappointing if you thought you were going to get this game. Obviously, I think the plan is to get this game ready for next fall. And then we'll probably see some of it this summer. We'll see some, like, official reveal, and then next year we'll see a lot more of it, and then the fall it will come out. But then we'll get our inevitable series of 25 delays that every game receives these days. So it's just crazy to me that they have the audacity to put this in the news cycle. Obviously, this isn't EA looking for a way to spin it into news. It came up on an investor call, so it's not like they're trying to get this into the news cycle, so I can forgive it in this instance. But I'm so tired of hearing about this game that we haven't ever even seen yet. But you might remember that last October, BioWare general manager Gary McKay stated that Dragon Age Dreadwolf has reached its alpha status and was playable from opening scenes of the first mission to the very end of the game at this point. So they are really going gung-ho on polishing, fine-tuning, and putting this game together, kind of, so to speak. So, hey, I mean, like, they made the game. Now they're just trying to, like, make it a full-fledged, polished, completed project. So, hey, listen, take all the time you need. I have no problem with the fact that this game's taken a long time to make. That's fine. Take all the time you need. But just keep it out of the news cycle until we got something to really talk about. Please and thank you. All right. Now that's going to do it for all of our mild amusements and story updates of that for the week. Next, we're going to jump into the actual news. But before we do that, you know how it goes. We slow down. We talk about the games we've been playing for the week, chat a little bit about that, catch up, see how we're doing. But before I can even tell you about the games I've been playing this week, which, spoiler alert, it's Redfall, I got to tell you about what I've been eating, first of all. Okay, can we talk about this? Mtn Dew Summer Freeze. It is here. Our summer flavor is here. Mtn Dew Summer Freeze. You guys know I've been hard on Mtn Dew because they shit out too many flavors. They quite honestly, that's my number one complaint. Surprisingly, my number one complaint is that they put out too many flavors in a year, and not my number two complaint, which is that so many of their modern flavors suck. They lost the spirit of what Mtn Dew even is, and they'll just slap the Mtn Dew logo on anything that tastes vaguely like some kind of fruit or candy with high fructose corn syrup and carbonation. So, good news, Summer Freeze, the new summer Mtn Dew flavor for this year, is out, and it's good. It's actually pretty damn good. So, it is it's going after the flavor profile of those like classic, I know there's a name for them, but I don't know, Johnny Pops or whatever they're called, the like red, white, and blue popsicles that you just kind of associate with summertime. So it's kind of going for that flavor profile in the form of a soda. And you know what? It really works for Mtn Dew. It kind of tastes like Voltage, the blue Mtn Dew, a little bit with a little twist of something else. So the finish definitely has that popsicle, that summer popsicle kind of finish flavor, and it actually works pretty well in the soda. So I'm into that. And Voltage is one of the best Mtn Dew flavors. So using that as your basis to build upon is always a great idea. So it means you're going to get a good soda there. So I am a fan of Mtn Dew Summer Freeze. I'm into it. The can art is simply phenomenal. And like most modern Mtn Dew flavors, it does come in both regular and zero sugar variants. So I will say the zero sugar, quite good. Regular version, better than the zero sugar, but both are great. And as someone who doesn't really drink soda that much anymore, I am going to be actually probably drinking a whole lot of the zero sugar version of this throughout the summer, because I like once or twice a year kind of going on a Mtn Dew binge and having that be like my forced personality for a little bit, you know? Around Halloween time when Voodoo comes out, that's always my thing, you know? For the whole month of October, maybe even a little bit September, I just drink so much Mtn Dew Voodoo because why not? It's cool. It's like, you know, it's like, what do you do? It's like, oh, you know, I'm an engineer. I make engines in ears. Oh, what do you do? Oh, I'm a musician. I make music, and sometimes you hear it in movies, and sometimes pop stars perform my songs, and I make many dollars, and I get my melody stuck in the heads of millions of people around the world. And, you know, they ask me, what do you do? And it's like, I do the Dew. I'm Mtn Dew. I drink Mtn Dew. I hold the cans. I talk about it on my audio only podcast where they don't see me holding the cans. It's Mtn Dew. It's my thing. I don't have anything going for me, so Mtn Dew is my thing. So it's good. It's fun, and I'm not ashamed that I didn't pick a better career path. You know, when I was doing my degree in college and all that, I think Mtn Dew was the right choice. It's good. I like Mtn Dew Summer Freeze. I still think they're going a little too hard with how many flavors they do. You know, for context, because Mtn Dew doing a summer flavor, that's normal. That's normal. Dew SA was the one we were getting for a while back, about 6 or 7 years ago, whenever the last Zelda game came out. And it was just a tri-blend of Whiteout, white Mtn Dew, Code Red, the red Mtn Dew, and Voltage, the blue Mtn Dew, all into a can. It's called Dew SA, red, white, and blue, like USA. It was really funny. It was really campy. It was really stupid and goofy as hell. And I loved it. It was a great flavor. And then they did that for a couple years for the summertime. And then in 2019, they were like, now let's do something a little more unique. Let's create an all new flavor. So they came out with Liberty Brew, and everyone was like, oh no, they're going to fuck it up. Liberty Brew was actually fucking awesome. It was a brand new flavor. It was so good. They did it for 2019 and 2020. It was phenomenal. I drank so much of it. That flavor always makes me think of moving to Florida, because it came out right around the time I moved to Florida. So I remember getting my first apartment and being like, I guess, I'm an adult now, so I probably just, stock my fridge with Mtn Dew all the time. Like, that's how being an adult works. So I have a lot of love for that flavor. And then they, ever since then, they've just kind of been like shit in the bed hard, where like they just keep trying to throw out all these like random fruit flavors in the summertime, where they just put the Baja Blast name onto it, and then they make like mango, pineapple, peach, and it's like they all sound interesting, but they're never actually good. And they just keep shitting out all these flavors. We get Thunder this, and Pitch Black's coming back, but not before we first get a raspberry lemonade for the third time. And it's too much. Some of the flavors are good. Some of the flavors are straight up ass, but I kind of wish Mtn Dew would just cool off, you know? Like, I like the I like the seasonality of Mountain Dew. I like having your main 4 or 5 flavors that are just always on standby, available throughout the year. And then, like, for summer, you have a summer flavor. For the holidays, you have a holiday flavor. For Halloween, you have a Halloween flavor. I like that. But I don't necessarily need them to make a new flavor every 3 months. It's overwhelming, it's stressful, and while every now and then it is nice to have a new flavor, slow your roll, you know? Slow your roll. I don't need this 7 new Mountain Dews in a year. It's just too much. So, nonetheless, they won't stop because I keep buying them. So, shout out to Mtn Dew Summer Freeze. If you're a fan of the Dew, I highly recommend it. It's one of the better flavors they've done in recent history, and it definitely captures that summer feeling quite well. If you're nostalgic for your childhood, why don't you get yourself a can of high fructose corn syrup and enjoy some Mtn Dew Summer Freeze. Guys, that is it for what I've been eating this week. Now we will talk about what I've been playing, and that is, I made no secret about it. I've been playing Redfall. I've been playing lots of Redfall when I'm gaming. Guys, I'm about 12 hours into Redfall at this point, and last week we talked extensively about it, so I won't go too much into the grounds we tread last week regarding all the controversy of the game, but I gotta say, last week we talked a lot about what was going on with the controversy of Redfall. This week I want to talk about the game. I've been playing the game. I'm 12 hours in. I can speak to the game at this point. I have every intention of beating this game. In fact, once this podcast is over and uploading everything, I'm going right back to my Xbox to play more Redfall. Keep in mind, I have a weird taste in gaming, and I understand if you've been listening to this podcast for a long time, you might be like, Jesse, pat on, virtual pat on the back. You're a good guy. You mean well. I like your podcast. Good on you. But I don't trust your taste in gaming for shit. You like Sonic, you like Crossfire, and now you like Redfall. What is wrong with you, you abomination of a human being? And listen, that's fine. I honestly, no bad blood if you feel that way. But I just gotta speak honestly. I'm not trying to be a hipster and like this because other people are hating it, or hate Zelda because other people are liking it. I'm not trying to be that guy. I know it comes off that way, and I do apologize because I don't like that image for myself. I don't want that image for myself, but I understand I kind of create the image for myself by being this way, by sitting here and being probably the one Xbox podcast you're going to listen to this week that's going to tell you, yeah, Redfall's pretty good. Listen, I understand a lot of the crap this game gets, and it deserves a lot of the crap it gets, but I can't lie to you and say I'm not having a good time. This game is not first-party output. The quality of this game is not first-party. The overall goal and experience that this team is shooting for, you can clearly tell that some of this game's vision was a little mismanaged and the vision wasn't fully there. And a lot of the game just kind of feels like they're trying their hand at something they're not necessarily equipped to make. So I understand the complaints that, like, this isn't in Arcane's wheelhouse. They don't need to be making this game. It doesn't feel right. They're not doing this genre justice. Whatever. I understand all those criticisms. But at the end of the day, I find this game to be a lot of fun. And last week when I was talking about it, I was playing it on PC because it was a way of protesting the lack of 60 FPS on console at launch. But following my initial 3 or 4 hours with the game, having liked it on PC, I thought, maybe the game is just so much worse on Xbox that's what everyone's talking about, and I'm not experiencing it. So let me play it on Xbox, not because I'm conceding and going to Xbox after I said I'm waiting for the 60 FPS patch, but rather let me go play it on Xbox for a little bit so I can get a feel for just how much worse it is on Xbox compared to PC, expecting it to be so much worse. But guys, I played the game about half on PC, half on Xbox at this point, and the game definitely runs better on PC. Don't get me wrong. Frame rate's better for sure. I just fewer buggy glitches, which is funny in a world where PC games tend to be more broken than console games these days. But yeah, the game definitely is just a little more jank on Xbox, but not enough so that I felt like the game was unplayable on Xbox, complete garbage. This game sucks. 3 out of 10. Fuck you, Arcane. That's still not how I felt. The game definitely needs more time to iron out the kinks, the bugs, the animation glitches, get that 60 FPS locked and loaded, all these things. But if we put that aside and we just purely judge what the game is trying to be, what the gameplay loop is, the characters, the moment-to-moment gunplay, I think the game is pretty fun. I understand the criticisms that the AI is kind of dead and sometimes a little too easy. Sure, that's true. But I feel like this game is kind of just like a put on a podcast, enjoy the atmosphere, and just tick all the boxes on the map. And it's one of those games where the map is pretty underwhelming in terms of how many things there are to see and do. And so it appeals to that part of my brain that likes the faux open world, but it's really more of a linear experience, kind of like Rise of the Tomb Raider or something like that, where I can feel like I'm exploring and enjoying an open, expansive experience, but also it's pretty linear, so I'm not getting lost. I'm not overwhelmed by the daunting 50-hour main quest line or anything like that. It's just pretty straightforward, kind of like Far Cry, where Far Cry is a much bigger open world, and it has a lot more to do in it if you want. But if you beeline a Far Cry game, it is pretty linear. It is pretty hold your hand, direct you right where to go kind of thing. And I enjoy that experience. I will say one of the things I'm enjoying about Redfall that is technically a downside is that there's just not a whole lot to see other than the main quest line. Even the side quests are basically main quests. So you end up really doing everything in the game just by means of playing through the main story. And I understand how that's a huge issue for a lot of people because it's billed as like a games as a service, open world type whatever game. And people want to have that freedom to explore and see a lot and do a lot and all that. I don't want that. I want the game to be like 20 hours at most and then to move on with my life. So the fact that I feel like I'm kind of getting a little bit of that open world flavor, but I'm also kind of like seeing all the game has to offer and then I'll have the ability to move on with my life when I'm done here. It's actually a bonus. It's like a plus to me. So I actually count that as a pro while also understanding that for most people that would no doubt be a con. One objective issue with this game, and I think, Cronky said it best when I was talking to him, the game basically splits into two halves. Like, you beat half the game, and then you move on to a second map, and then you don't go back to the first map. So it's like, once you finish the first half of the game is just inaccessible for the rest of the game. And that is a huge, like, what the fuck kind of game is this? And that kind of brings me to my next thing is, I see a lot of people bitching and moaning about this game because they're like, Bethesda was just trying to force Arcane to do a games as a service, to cash grab. Everyone wants to be like Avengers and Destiny and Division. It's like, I don't see this game as that for a second. Yes, it obviously is inspired by the popular conventions of modern gaming, of games like Destiny. It has the weird mouse cursor in the menu that's broken, by the way, when you try to use it. And yes, it has the ability to like pick up gear. It's like, oh, this is the same gun I had a little while ago, but now it's a level 7 instead of a level 4, and now it's got this skin on it instead of that skin on it, and I can customize the look of it, and then, I got skill points, and I can distribute those skill points to my character and work on my skill tree. It has those trappings, but this game, let me be clear about this. I don't know if Xbox is the one saying this, if Arcane was the one saying this, Bethesda, or if it was just the fans kind of assuming. Or I don't know where the disconnect happens because I tuned out of this game during the marketing cycle because I was excited for it and I didn't want to see anymore. But this game is absolutely not a games as a service. It might be a game with extended content down the road. In fact, they promise to continue to work on the game and add more content to it. But it is not some multiplayer, season 1, make sure you grind your vampires to get your vamp bucks so you can buy your fucking ice cube steak for vampire slaying. That's not at all what this game is. It is very much like Far Cry, where it's like the game is what it is. There's all that it has to offer within the core experience, the base game, the first day release. And you can play it, you can experience it all, and then you can put it up on a shelf and be done with it. But at some point, the game's going to end. So I'm not really sure where this games as a service thing comes in. And like I said last week, I played multiplayer with Cronky for a little bit, for maybe like 2 hours, maybe. We played co-op, and I had fun. It was fine. Definitely the game feels like a single-player game where they let you play co-op, which is weird because they market it as a co-op game that can be played single-player. It definitely feels the other way around. It feels like playing together. It doesn't really offer any great benefit other than like your friend can kill all the enemies before you can. So I don't think that's a really great feature, and I don't feel like the character's special abilities between the 4 main characters really contributes or changes the way you play the game with friends, where it's like, okay, you are this character, so use this ability, and then I'll use this ability, and we'll attack the scenario that way. I understand that was the intention, was to be able to add more ways to approach the combat in the game by playing with friends, with all these characters with different abilities and skill trees and different weapons and all that. I get that, but the game doesn't feel like it executes on that at all. It feels like in all the ways this game tries to market itself, whether it's saying it's play with friends, everyone's got different abilities, it's a co-op game, it's a games as a service, and all those aspects, the game fucking bombs and fails catastrophically. But if you just want to play the game as a single player smallish linear open world experience that has some light RPG open world elements like gear levels on your guns and skill tree points like almost every modern RPG has these days. If you play it like that, which is how I've been playing it for the majority of my 12 hours spent with it, then the game's a lot of fun. It's not as good as the best Far Cry. It's not as good as the best, I don't know, like whatever other game you want to compare it to. I keep going back to Far Cry, but it's not like the best of this kind of genre necessarily, but it's a lot of dumb fun. It is a double A guilty pleasure, pure joy. And so if we're looking at this game as Game Pass fodder, just something to keep me hooked on Game Pass, this game actually succeeds quite well because, you know, it's a little slow for me as an Xbox gamer. I don't have a big Zelda game to look forward to or anything like that. And Redfall is kind of quite nicely kicking off my summer season where it's this 20-something hour experience. It's got amazing atmosphere, really cool setting, a really fun art, like world art design, not character design. The characters look like shit with their fucking crazy-ass monster hands. It's so scary. Character models in this game look like absolute ass. But the world is cozy. It's like it's a permanent Halloween cozy feel. It has the thing I loved about Left 4 Dead's aesthetic and vibe and setting and everything. This game has it too. So that's how this game reminds me of Left 4 Dead and connects me to Left 4 Dead is through that. And its gameplay is like a double A budgety kind of choppier, jankier version of like a Far Cry game with a lot less to see and do. And it's a little rough around the edges, but the core is there and it's fun. I think a lot of what they tried to do with this game with its co-op, with its like unique character abilities and things like that, falls flat on its face. And I agree with the criticism that, you know, playing it in multiplayer is actually kind of like less fun than playing it solo. But to me, that's a greater pro is I want to play the game by myself. So I don't know. I'm really enjoying Redfall while recognizing it's rough around the edges. This game is clearly a ball drop. I'm having a good time. I like it a lot. But we also have to acknowledge, you know, I have to acknowledge, overall the game's a failure because it was marketed as like this huge game from Arcane, who are now an Xbox first party team. It's this proven team with a great track record that's going to just make it another amazing game and hit it out of the park. But this time it's an Xbox exclusive, and this time it represents Game Pass and Microsoft's gaming brand, and it's going to be so good for the gamers of the Xbox community. It absolutely failed on all those fronts, no doubt. No doubt. But if you don't care about defending your green team and looking good against the blue guys or the red guys, and all you care about is just having something fun to play and getting some value out of your Game Pass subscription, I think Redfall is a pretty damn good time. And you know what I would really recommend is, if you're not super enthused about what the game is today, I say wait till Halloween when this game's gotten a couple updates under its belt. Hopefully 60 FPS on Xbox is out by then. Wait till Halloween time and then have this be like your big Halloween game this year. It's a blast, dude. It's a fucking blast. It's really fun. I'm just putting on my podcast, tuning out for 4 or 5 hour play sessions, just kind of fucking vampires in the head, collecting gear, grinding, doing the missions, exploring the houses, all the shit. Tonally, there's a lot of cool atmospheric stuff. There's a lot of cool lore and things to read around the open world, letters and diary logs and all these things that you can pick up and just get a sense for who the characters were and what the world was like shortly before the vampires came. And it's a really fun and interesting world to explore. It's, again, there's not a whole lot to it. It's pretty barren, but the gameplay loop is straightforward, simplistic, and simple enough that the loop is there. It's like, collect some stuff, pick up some lore in the area, find a safe house, break into it, turn the power on, whatever, get this little side quest, do the little side quest, defend the base, kill the monster, collect all the skulls of the monster, go to the house, put the skulls together, fight the bigger boss, go back to the safe house, level up, chat with your guys, take on the next objective, get some more lore. You know, you just kind of loop this like really, really basic, really easy, straightforward, linear kind of structure. And it's just a bunch of dumb fun. It's a really fun game. The character models are fucking horrific. They look so terrifying. I don't know why this game looks like a fucking PS2 game, banged an N64 game with HD from the Xbox 360, and the characters are terrifying. They look worse than the little fucking troll people from Harry Potter, and I'm worse off for having seen these character models. But aside from that, and aside from the god-awful odd achievement that this game offers, yes, I'm looking at you 17 gamer score motherfucking achievements, effing up my gamer score, giving me odd gamer score. I'm looking at you. I hate you. Despite these kinds of things, Redfall is a fun time. If you're looking at it to be the saving grace of your brand, if you have nothing going on in your pathetic life and all you're waiting for is for Redfall to be a 10 out of 10 so you can go over to your friends who like PlayStation and rub it in your non-existent PlayStation friends and rub it in their face that fuck you, God of War, Redfall got a 9 out of 10, Redfall got a 10 out of 10. You're pathetic. You got bigger problems in the world than Redfall ended up being like a 6 or a 7. It's maybe you shouldn't be so fixated on this because maybe you got bigger problems. But if you're just looking for a good time, and yeah, it is disappointing that Redfall isn't all that we hoped and thought it might be. But if you're just looking for a good time, you want to kill some vampires, you want to get into the Halloween spooky season kind of mood, dude, Redfall's a blast. Have some fun. Get your expectations in check, understand what it is, and definitely hold your developers and publishers to a higher standard and expect better from them. But also, don't be afraid to just enjoy Redfall. It's a fun game. So, I don't know. That's my take on it. A couple of you guys, I asked, write in. Let me know what you guys think about Redfall. A couple of you guys did write in. So, we're going to pull these from the comments at the end of the show and read them now because you guys have some things to say about Redfall. So, let's dig into the audience feedback on the game. Dead Captain James, the OG one and only, who's recently transformed into a dirt bike. He went from human form to a dirt bike. Writes in and says, "It's been a while since I was this disappointed by a game. I was really, really looking forward to Redfall. I love arcane games. My biggest complaint is the AI. It's some of the worst AI I've ever seen in modern AAA gaming. Great podcast as always." Yeah, Dead Captain James, you absolutely, well, first of all, thank you for writing. You absolutely bring up, something I touched on, but definitely didn't go deep on, which is the AI in this game really is bad. And Video Game Donkey, for those who follow him, he has a really funny video on this game where he posts a really funny video about Redfall. And he kind of put it best, I think, where he was like, he was playing with one other friend, and there were so few enemies, and the AI was so dumb that his friend was just basically like running up, killing every enemy. And Donkey would be like, "Hey, you think maybe I can get the next bad guy?" And then his friend would get the kill, and he'd be like, okay, maybe the next bad guy, you let me get the kill. And it is true like that. Like I could imagine if I were playing this game with 3 other people, holy shit, because they advertise it as a 4-player game. If I were playing this as a 4-player experience, oh my God, dude, I cannot imagine, because there'd be so little combat. On single player, I feel like the combat balance is perfect because I don't need to be like horde zombie fighting like Left 4 Dead, but it is kind of like, it's kind of nice. Like sometimes it will be really desolate. There won't be a lot of bad guys around, and it kind of gives you an opportunity to just explore a house or explore part of the map and take in the atmosphere and soak in some notes and some items you see around the world and get like a deeper sense of what this world is. And that's nice. And then sometimes you open up a door and boom, there's like a shit ton of vampires and you're overwhelmed. And I kind of like that experience, the you never know what you're going to get, kind of almost like horror kind of twist on the enemy variety. But once you go beyond 1 player, forget about it. It's just like, it's barren. It's like, I can't find anyone to fight. This sucks. So I definitely understand that complaint. And then the AI is absolutely, you're right, it's terrible. I'm playing on one of the easier difficulties, and I really probably should have bumped it up, because sometimes I feel like I don't even have to be stealthy. I just walk behind an enemy and just blast them in the fucking face with a shotgun. They're dead in 1 hit. I'm like, that wasn't even a challenge. What am I doing here? So you're right. The AI is bad, and hopefully that is something they focus on with future updates. But again, there's no excuse for releasing your game in that state. As someone who's just chronically shit at games, it's less of an issue for me. Because, if the AI was competent, I'd probably just be really bad at the game. But no doubt, gamers expect compelling, smart, and challenging AI that's going to force you to kind of think on your toes and figure out unique and creative ways to approach combat rather than just run up behind a guy and shoot him in the back of the head and be done with it. Mr. Malg wrote in about Redfall and says, "I think it's important to remember that Redfall is Xbox's first $70 first-party game. I think it's an easy excuse for some of the downfalls when not paying $70 for the game, but I'm further convinced that $70 games are a bad and terrible idea, actually. Games still come out unfinished, not just with Redfall, but Jedi Survivor, and the game still has one of those BS deluxe editions. Yeah, and fucking EA was bragging about Jedi Survivor, despite it having all the issues. Yeah, this is an important point. This is absolutely an important point, because if I bought Redfall for $70, I probably would feel different about it. That's absolutely right. I didn't bring that up last week. I didn't bring that up just now. So thank you for kind of bringing us back to reality with this qualifier, because I don't know what I would do with Redfall, because I'm usually not a pre-order kind of guy. I pre-order with rare exception, I'm like maybe like Sonic or something like that. I'll pre-order, but with Redfall, if there was no such thing as Game Pass, I probably wouldn't have pre-ordered Redfall. I would have waited for day one to see if the game is broken or not, and then probably would have bought it day one. But yeah, I mean, like, if I heard the game is just shit, it's not worth your money, I probably would not have bought this game for $70. I know myself well enough to know if this game were only available as a $70 game and on day one, the reviews were like, what a letdown, 5 out of 10, 5 out of 10, I would have been like, I'll wait for a sale. I'm not buying this game. So it's important that you bring that up, because you're absolutely right. For people who spend $70, I do feel for you. You have more of an axe to grind and more of a reason to be upset. I guess the thing is, it's like I'm sitting here wondering who's buying these games. Who the hell is out there? This is an Xbox exclusive. It's only on PC and Xbox. Who the hell is going out there like, yeah, I could subscribe to Game Pass and play this game for $15 for the month and then cancel my subscription, or I could give them $70 and just play the game forever. I don't understand. I guess there are some people who want to do that. And I can respect that, but like, I don't know, man. I just always think like, why would you not be playing this on Game Pass? But you're absolutely right. It inexcusable for $70. And I feel like to go any further on your comment would kind of touch on part of our Phil Spencer interview later on. So I'll kind of leave it at that. But no doubt we will get back to this idea of how could Xbox let this happen once we get to that interview. And then our final comment on Redfall comes from Cronky, who says, Redfall is very fun. At the end of the day, that's all that matters. I very much enjoy the world, environment, and exploration. Yes, it lacks polish, but to be honest, it's arcane. If it came out completely polished and perfect, no one would have played it regardless. You're half right. I think this game would have gotten a lot of attention because it has more mainstream appeal with what it's trying to market itself as, and with the nature of it being an Xbox first-party game, a Game Pass title, all these things, it would have garnered some more attention. But you are right that generally, it's arcane. It's going to review our reviews, and then no one's going to give a shit about it. So, but yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, there's something probably fundamentally broken with both of us. But I like Redfall. I think it's a good game. I don't think it's a great game. I definitely think it has a long road to go before it's a game I would recommend to people. But it like a game where I'd be like, you gotta play Redfall. But as it stands right now, it is a game that I think if you have Game Pass and you're just looking for some dumb fun and you are a fan of AA and games with a little bit of jank that can be rough around the edges, you're someone like me who can enjoy a Crossfire X from time to time, and you don't need every fucking game to be God of War level of polish. We should expect games to be highly polished, but I understand the reality of the situation that games don't always come out that way, and I still find a lot of enjoyment in sometimes jank or broken games. And this is just one of those games. I recognize it is not technically great, but I'm having a lot of fun with it. Right now, if I had to score it, if I had to IGN it, I'd probably give it like a 7 out of 10. It's real rough around the edges. Definitely not for everyone. Wouldn't recommend it to many people. But for me, it's a pretty fun time. I'm glad you think so too, Cronky. All right, that's it for all our not our comments, but all of our what I've been playing, what we've been eating, your guys' thoughts on Redfall. I appreciate the write-ins. We'll get into more comments towards the end of the show, but with that, guys, let's take a quick break and then jump into this Phil Spencer interview with Kinda Funny. This big news topic we have to go over this week. All right, so let's jump into this crazy Phil Spencer news. I really wish that I was able to do the podcast right after this story came out, because last week I was really like gnawing at this a whole lot. It was really kind of the most provoked and interested and engaged I've been with something Xbox related in a while, in terms of just like kind of some industry news. But man, this Phil Spencer situation is kind of crazy. So to catch you up to speed, if you're living under a rock, you haven't heard. So Phil Spencer, the CEO of gaming himself, came on to Kinda Funny last week. Kinda Funny, for those who don't know, it's like a big YouTube, internet, like, what do you call it, like a media brand company. They do podcasts, YouTube videos, all that stuff. So I used to follow those guys religiously back in their early founding days, when it was just like Colin Moriarty, Greg Miller, and Nick Scarpino and stuff in their spare bedroom in San Francisco, just like podcasting about video games and stuff. It was the best. I actually saw them live once back in Atlanta in their early days. Ran into them. I met Colin Moriarty, and then I told him I'm sorry to bother him, and then I walked away, and it was awkward, but it was awesome. Okay, but no, all joking aside. So for those who don't know, kind of funny. They've since gone on to grow into something much bigger. I don't really follow them anymore. Just not my thing anymore. But they're big. They're like some whole like media influencer brand about gaming. I don't really know what it is. I don't recognize anyone who works there anymore. They got like 1 million people on staff. They got a beautiful studio, and they got a bunch of different podcasts that weren't around back when I used to listen to. So I don't really know how else to explain kind of funny these days, but. They used to be a lot more of like a grassroots, like just dudes who used to work at IGN talking about video games with kind of like their insider knowledge, and it was kind of real. But I know these days it's a lot of like paid partnerships and sponsorships with publishers and developers. So I mean, this is no disrespect to the guys at Kind of Funny, but it is definitely one of those brands where it's like you want to maybe categorize them in that field of like They're PR. They're not news, Like I feel like we don't really. There's not a whole lot of news left in the world. Everything's PR. Like all your major news networks, like Fox and CNN, those aren't news outlets. They're PR outlets. They get news from the White House and from their corporate donors and stuff who tell them what they want to say, and then they go on the news and tell you it so that you have the PR talk. And that's kind of like what a brand like this is. It's fine if you know what it is. Like there's nothing against it, but it's not news. Like generally if they have an interview with someone like a Phil Spencer, or if they're like covering a game, it's generally like, they're working with the publisher, they got paid to cover it. And so you can expect like interviews like this with Phil Spencer are going to be a lot of softballs, a lot of like, it's more promotional material than it is actual like an interview to uncover some kind of legitimate news. So I saw Phil Spencer. The reason I bring all this up is just to say, when I saw that Phil Spencer was on Kind of Funny, I was like, okay, I guess they have an Xbox podcast called the XCast. I knew of that. I'm not familiar with the host, but I knew they had an Xbox podcast. And I was like, okay, so Phil Spencer was on their Xbox podcast. It's probably, whatever. It's probably like some promotional interview for Redfall or whatever. And then I saw that it was like, apparently it was like a tell-all. Like apparently it was like really interesting stuff in this interview. I was starting to see a lot of chatter about it just a few hours after it happened. So I was like, okay, let me see what the fuck's going on here. So I for the first time in like 5-6 years, I don't know how long it's been, since like 2018 or 2017, for the first time in a long time, I went online. I was like, okay, let's see what the fuck Kind of Funny is doing. Kind of Funny Phil Spencer. And I watched this whole 40-minute interview, and I gotta say, you could tell this was definitely, to some extent, pre-rehearsed. It was pre-planned. It was very amicable, like, exchange of, like, hey, we're here to talk about, Xbox and to prop you up and have this be, like, a PR platform for you. But it ended up just kind of the way things went with Redfall coming out, being a disaster, and then immediately this interview was scheduled right after that all happened. It kind of ended up being a little bit of, like, a legitimate interview to some extent. No disrespect. Again, I don't know the host of the Xbox X podcast or the Kind of Funny X cast. I'm not familiar with the host. I don't mean any, shade to them, but again, they're well-trained personalities doing like PR talk. They're here to like be like, Phil Spencer, you're such a cool guy. I love when you fly us out to LA to test out games and see shit. Like, what can you tell us about awesome new games you're working on? I expect something like that, but they actually had a pretty damn cool good interview with Phil Spencer. They asked him some questions I wasn't expecting to hear them ask. They pressed a little more than I thought they would press, and Phil Spencer, man, you can... You almost feel bad for the guy because you can tell he's in a headspace. Like when he does this interview, he's definitely in some kind of headspace where he's not feeling 100% himself, and he's just being a little more candid than you'd expect someone in such a high-ranking position to be. And so I really thought this was it ended up just kind of being one of those interviews where it's like, this is huge information. This is a huge interview. This is a great get for Kind of Funny. Like this is obviously going to draw a lot of attention and traffic to them. So great job on them for being able to get this interview and make of it what they were able to make of it. So, still, like, if you go back and watch, and I highly recommend you watch, just as a heads up, like, listen, they did the interview, they put the work together to make this all happen. I highly recommend you go and watch the interview. It's worth watching. All 40 minutes of it are pretty entertaining. So I recommend you go watch the Kind of Funny XCast interview with Phil Spencer from last week. But what we're going to do is basically break down some of the key moments, go through a lot of the quotes from Phil Spencer, and talk about what we learned from Phil Spencer, just kind of Phil Spencer's a pretty PR trained guy. Generally, I always make the joke on the podcast, and don't get me wrong, I like Phil Spencer. I think he's a likable guy. I think he's as genuine as someone in his position can be, someone who gets paid a fucking ridiculous executive salary and works that high up the ranks of Microsoft, one of the biggest powers in the entire globe. He seems like a pretty genuine guy, and I trust that from who he was, from his foundation and how he came up the ranks within Microsoft and through Xbox. I trust that he is a well-intended gamer who genuinely cares about the developers and the brand and trying to deliver. Especially, I don't give so much shit about how he, his desire to give to the fans, because I think it's weird to kind of expect your corporate overlords to serve you. But I do believe a lot of what he says about like how, I worked directly with developers. I used to be more in the trenches, and I want to be a leader who represents creatives and gives creatives free, energy and rope and creative freedom to do what they want to do, sometimes to a detrimental state, which I think we'll get into with this talk. But generally, I like Phil Spencer quite a bit. But generally, he's also, he's a high paid executive. He's a PR talk box. He can't normally be a human being. To a large extent. That's why I'm always making the jokes on the podcast. I'm like, Phil Spencer, he always goes, well, when I think about, and that's always how people like respond to questions when they're PR trained. It's like, when I think about Redfall and the position of our gamers and Game Pass and the value that we offer the players and the kinds of content that we want to drive and the initiatives we're trying to bring forward in the ecosystem, like that's the kind of response you expect to hear from a Phil Spencer type, because no offense to the guy, he's just doing his job. He's got to speak within the bounds he's allowed to speak within. He represents a big brand, a big company. He's got to do his job right. That's what he's paid to do, right? So I get that, but this was not that Phil Spencer. We saw Phil Spencer. There were multiple moments in this interview where he said some things where I was like, damn, dude, you just know he's gonna get a call after this interview, where like he's gonna get coached, he's gonna get talked to, there's gonna be some like damage control, there's gonna be some like people at Microsoft are gonna be trying to like patch relationship, you call in various news outlets who are covering it, trying to be like, let us clarify what Phil Spencer meant when he said ... There are multiple like instances in this interview where he said something where I'm just like, holy shit, I cannot believe Phil Spencer said. Conversely, I also think there's some really corporate PR talk coming from both ends in this interview, but nonetheless, it is definitely one of the most engaging and just full of information kind of interviews we've gotten in a long time, especially considering games aren't necessarily important life altering news. It's not like a medium or an entertainment medium, or sorry, it's not like a medium at all where what's going on with video games is particularly detrimental or indicative of our overall quality of life and the way the world is going. So it's not usually that important, but this was a damn good interview for considering what it could have been. Anyway, I'm making no sense. So let's get into this. So I basically broke it down. I copied some articles from VGC where they pull out lots and lots of quotes, and then I rewatched. So I watched this interview 3 times to be completely frank with you guys. So last night, preparing for the show, I watched it for the 3rd time. I pulled out a lot of bullet points, things I wanted to make sure we covered, and then I pulled all these quotes that VGC had transcribed. So we got a lot of stuff we can pour through. The first one in particular is going to be especially long with the quotes that I have here. But let's just kind of go in and talk about this. And again, I highly recommend you do watch this because it's quite entertaining and it's really informative. But so starting on the topic of Redfall, so Phil Spencer talks about the creative vision of the game. They ask him basically, when you see a game like Redfall come out and it gets the reviews it gets, what are you thinking when it's like, people are saying this game isn't finished. How could Microsoft release it in this state? And Phil Spencer's response is basically like, hey, when we think about games, it's not just like, is the game fully polished and ready to go out? It's more about like, did the creative team accomplish their goal? When a developer sets out to create a game, there's a goal they have in mind, like a mission they're trying to accomplish, like something they're trying to make. And it's not necessarily a score they're going off of. It's more of like, was the mission accomplished? He said in the case of Redfall that it was like the team just didn't meet their creative vision, and that delaying the game wouldn't have solved it. Delaying the game could have solved some technical performance issues, no doubt, but delaying the game wouldn't have solved the fact that, Arcane set out to create something. They had a creative goal, a vision for the game in mind. And after so many years of development, what they created did not accomplish their goal. Really, the only, and, what you can kind of glean from that is like the game in actuality didn't end up being what they thought it would be from the conceptual stage. And so, yeah, you could have made the game run buttery smooth, perfect animations, beautiful graphics, all the rest. But at the end of the day, the core gameplay loop is going to be what the game is. And he's saying from that perspective, the team just didn't meet their goal, their vision. To this, I somewhat call BS because I think you can delay a game to make it to accomplish its goal. Now it may be one of those things we had to kind of weigh the options to say, do we just cancel this game or do we continue to delay it? Because it might take such a long delay that you have to gut out what you've built of the game and kind of basically rebuild the ship, so to speak, as you're going. Which in that case, I understand it kind of begs a different question of like, should this game be canceled? Should this game even continue to be funded? Whatever. But I kind of push back on Phil Spencer a little bit on this, in that I just think that, if the creative vision isn't coming together, it's like maybe you can go back to the drawing board and really rework from a base level what the game is and get it to where you want it to be. But then again, I've never made a game. I'm not a creative in that way. And so I don't know. But that was kind of his first thing, is that, yeah, the game is rough around the edges, and I understand that. But the bigger issue with Redfall is that the game did not end up being what Arcane had envisioned it to be back when they first came up with the very conceit of the game, the concept of what this game would be. He also mentioned that, well, kind of funny, the hosts of the show mentioned, they're like, well, normally these kinds of games you do mock reviews. How did that go? Like, what did you guys expect? Because generally, a little behind the scenes, how it works when games are coming out, especially with big publishers behind them, is a game will be mock reviewed, which is basically, Activision's making a game and they go, okay, Diablo 4, we want to know how the game's going to review. So a few months before the game comes out, they hire people who are sometimes industry, like games industry veterans, or just like these blacklist, or not blacklist, but like these unknown, for hire kind of people who are really, really credited within this tight ecosystem that maybe the general public isn't super familiar with, who are basically these professional review game critics, but their job is to review games that aren't out yet and kind of give publishers an idea, like, hey, I played your game, I reviewed your game, this is how I would score it, this is what I would say about your game. And that way the publisher knows going into it, like, hey, we had these mock reviews from these random, these various people, and this is what we came back with, is the game is a 7 out of 10. So they think going into it, okay, when we get this game over to GameSpot and IGN and Kotaku and VGC and all these outlets, we're expecting them to score the game around a 7 out of 10 range. It helps the publisher get an idea of what they're walking into for marketing purposes and damage control purposes and how to steer the ship from there. It's a really, really common practice. Basically, everyone in the industry does it. And basically, so kind of funny asked, like, well, surely you mock reviewed this game. How did you not know that it was going to be kind of a catastrophe when it launched? And what Phil Spencer said was that their mock reviews came back with double-digit higher reviews, meaning that, the game's sitting at a 63 on Metacritic, saying that the game apparently mock reviewed somewhere at least in the 7 range, in the 70s range, for double digits, he said. So if it got a 63 on Metacritic, that means it was mock reviewing at least like a low to mid 7 out of 10. So that's hard to believe to some extent, because usually mock reviews are not that far off from what they say, not that I would know that, just, from consuming so much games industry podcasts and YouTube and shit like that. It's apparently not very common for a mock review to be that far off base, especially because you get multiple mock reviews from many sources. And so, for multiple people have a very, very different take from what all the main outlets thought. Usually a little unheard of. So you almost wonder if Phil Spencer is even being sincere when he says that, although I don't want to accuse the man of lying when I don't know. It's just conjecture at that point. So it's not worth going down that rabbit hole. It's just surprising to see that Microsoft was prepared for the game to at least be somewhere in the 7 range on Metacritic, which is just not even close to where it ended up. So to get into some of these quotes here, so we're looking at these VGC quotes, and this is verbatim what Phil Spencer says. He goes, quote, "There's nothing that's more difficult for me, nothing more disappointing for the Xbox, there's nothing more difficult for me than disappointing the Xbox community. I've been a part of it for a long time. I obviously work on Xbox. I'm head of the business. I had a lot of friends and get a lot of feedback. And it's just kind of hard to watch the community lose confidence, be disappointed. I'm disappointed. I'm upset with myself. He added, "We do mock review games for every game that we launch, and this is double digits lower than what we thought it would be. That's one of the most disappointing things. We never strive to launch a game that we thought was going to review in the low 60s. It's not part of our goals." Okay, so a little highlight that. They do not intend to launch games that review in the low 60s. It's not part of their goal, which means clearly they care about hitting some kind of Metacritic stride, some kind of quality bar that is, above average, because I know people like to act like the only scores that exist are 10s and 0s, but yes, 6 out of 10 means a game is, not terrible, not bad, but it's nothing particularly great. It's kind of whatever, maybe mediocre, maybe solid, maybe it's got some good stuff in it, but it's not necessarily great. Continuing on, he says, "If you look at our review scores over the past year, and this is not a defense at all, I think teams have done a much better job at upping the quality level of their games that that Xbox has shipped, and the game was significantly lower than their internal metrics compared to what actually reviewed. But that's not on anybody but us. We have to own that." Spencer was then asked generally about how it's decided whether a game should be delayed, and the exec said that Xbox wouldn't push a project back if it didn't believe that it could realize its creative vision as a result of a delay. He says, quote, "There's a quality issue. We're working on those, but fundamentally, it's the piece of feedback I get from Redfall reviews is that the game isn't realizing its creative vision for its players. That it doesn't feel like, hey, just delay it. It feels like the game had a goal to do, and when more players are actually playing it, they're not feeling that goal. When a game needs to be delayed, like what we did with Starfield, Halo, Redfall, because the production timeline is saying we have this vision and our product timeline doesn't get us to the completion of the vision, we do delay games." The exec went on to play down a number of technical issues in Redfall, instead claiming that the game's poor reception was mostly because the development team didn't hit its goals. And this is one thing I do slightly take umbrage with, because from what I'm seeing on Twitter, it's hard, the internet at large, but Twitter is where I get a lot of reactionary feedback. It's kind of the fun of Twitter. It's why you go on it, right? It seems like it's a lot of that, like, really irrational, like, the frame rate is bad and the animations are bad and the graphics are kind of shit. Therefore, the game is garbage. Redfall sucks. Redfall's a 0 out of 10 because the animations are bad, it's glitchy, and it's buggy. 0 out of 10. And, the converse is the Xbox fans who are like, you guys don't get it. The game's actually really good. Love Redfall. They're just not willing to say anything bad about it. And then, there's not a whole lot of that in between where we can admit, like, hey, this game definitely needed a pretty good delay, because you can tell there's some good here, and it's rough around the edges. And so I fundamentally disagree with Phil Spencer on this, because I do feel like he's shying away from the reality of the situation, which is that Redfall would have been much better had it gotten a 6-month or 12-month delay. I understand a lot of people feel like that's not the case. People probably agree with Phil Spencer that the game just didn't meet its vision. I disagree. I think you delay this game for 10 months, fix the AI, work on the just general bugginess and animations, smoothing out the game, make it run well, purr like a well-oiled machine. Sure, at the end of the day, you still run into this issue of, this doesn't really feel like there's like cohesive when you got all the players in conjunction, on a 3-4 player world or something like that. Maybe you still run into that issue, right? But you can fix the issue where sometimes there's not enough enemies. Sometimes there's the enemy AI is just dog shit. You can fix that. You can fix the terrible hands that look like monster hands on all the humans. You can fix the weird animations where the reloads look funny, or people are just floating or skipping or glitching out. You can fix that. You can make the game run at 60 FPS on Xbox Series X. That's all you can do all those things. I promise you the game would have reviewed better. In fact, I feel very confident that if this game was well polished, it would be somewhere in the 7s, Because at its core, I agree, the game isn't anything that's like groundbreaking or anything, but it's also not bad. The performance issues of this game absolutely cloud the judgment of the players, no doubt. So I just fundamentally disagree with Phil Spencer on this, kind of shying away from the quality of the game and all that, and kind of blaming it on the team not meeting their vision. And if I'm Arcane, maybe I'm a little upset about this, because I feel like, hey man, we needed more time to make this game great, and you're kind of blaming it on our vision of the game. And I don't know, and maybe he's right. Maybe he's speaking on behalf of the team, and this is what the team has expressed to him, and that's what he's here to say. But I don't know. As someone who's put 12 hours into the game so far, I feel like the big problem this game has is all the rough around the edges stuff, the AI, the bugs, the frame rate and things like that. I don't think the issue is necessarily as much that the game's just not meeting its creative vision. I think it's nothing groundbreaking, but it doesn't have to be. It's a pretty fun game. Anyway, He goes on to say, how he loves Arcane Austin. He defends their track record, and he'd bet on them again, and that, going forward, all that. So he kind of basically just defends the whole, like, the game's creative vision was the issue more so than it was the bugs. And then also mentions that Microsoft, that Xbox and Bethesda will continue to support Redfall, like they've supported Sea of Thieves in games like that. So it's a little concerning because I almost don't know that this game can make a comeback after the kind of thud it's had. But we'll see. Maybe it's a No Man's Sky situation. I don't know. But I mean, I guess that's where the games as a service aspect comes. So far, I don't really know how you really support this game other than just doing like DLC, but whatever. But Mr. Mal, to come back to your comment earlier, here's Phil Spencer speaking on the game's price and all that, where he says, quote, "I also know that these games are $70, and I'm going to take full responsibility for launching a game that needs to be great. We let a lot of people down this week in the launch of the game, but we will continue to strive on. You have to. That's what creativity is about." So yeah, he basically acknowledges it and then says, "Sorry, we got to be better." So later in the interview, Spencer was asked to reflect on the lessons Xbox could take away from Redfall's launch state. Spencer said that he believes the platform holder should have done more early in the game's development in terms of providing assistance to Arcane and setting expectations. So this is where we get into the first bit of truly juicy information. So Spencer says, quote, "When we acquire studios, there are games that are in development, and there are things that are either really early in development or not even conceived yet. I think we need to improve in engaging with games that are midway through production when they become part of Xbox." It's a really important quote. I think we need to improve on engaging with games that are midway through production when they become part of Xbox. I do think that there's a different expectation for a game when when you've been third party and then all of a sudden you become first party. There's a different expectation in terms of how you're going to perform on our consoles. I think there's a different a competitive set of when people look at that and say, hey, I want this game to feel as competitive as the other games on the other console. And we didn't do a good job of engaging Arcane Austin to really help them understand what it meant to be part of Xbox first party and use some of our internal resources to help move along the journey even faster. We left them to work on the game. They're very talented. I love the team, and I still do, and I will totally bet on them to do another great game. But when Xbox head studio Matt Booty and ZeniMax president Jamie Leader sit down, I think we can engage earlier in our different studios. And I do think that there's a difference when it comes and I think there's a difference when we come in and the creative is already set on the game. And that's not washing our hands. Every game we ship from our teams is an Xbox game, so we take full responsibility for it. Spencer said he believes the platform holder did a great job with Bethesda's other 2023 release, the sci-fi RPG Starfield, in terms of assisting development, because that game was early in production. So before we even get into that, actually, I want to stop for a second and address this, because this is the huge thing where you're watching the interview and you're hearing Phil Spencer say these things. It's like, yes, Phil Spencer, yes, thank you, you get it. But then you stop and you think about it for a minute long. You're like, wait a minute. You're what ranked position in this company and you make how much money and you're just now saying this? There's no way you can. I don't mean to be so cruel about it. Like, again, I like Phil Spencer. I feel bad that he's the punching bag of the industry right now. Not because, games are so important, but because he's a human being and I don't want humans to be fucking cyberbullied to hell and back because a video game didn't end up being great. That's just silly. So I feel bad for the guy. I feel like he's kind of down right now, and I don't mean to kick him while he's in such a state, but stop for a fucking minute. You're the motherfucking CEO of gaming. You're the head of Xbox. And going back to this quote, you just addressed something that everyone could. I promise you, I've said this on this podcast at some point in time back during the acquisition stage of Bethesda. Yes, absolutely, dude. When you acquire Bethesda becomes part of Xbox. It's why it's a little weird when you announce these summer showcases and it's like the Xbox and Bethesda summer showcase. Listen, I understand Bethesda's a strong brand name. It's a strong company name. You own that. Maybe you don't want to just wash it away, but all of this is part of Xbox now. And Xbox has grown too big for its own bridges, I think, in a lot of ways. Like, they can barely manage the studios they currently have. How are they going to manage all these other teams they're acquiring? So I understand the importance of maybe keeping ZeniMax around and Bethesda and ZeniMax and all that, so that you can continue to have that structure in place where the Bethesda side, the ZeniMax side kind of handles all those studios. But because, Matt Booty can't just handle everything on his own. You know, Phil Spencer and Matt Booty can't run the entire fucking gamut, especially if they get Activision, the 700 Call of Duty developers in their family as well. It's just too much. So maybe you do need to keep those umbrellas, like the Activision division, the ZeniMax division, the Xbox Game Studios division. So I kind of get it from that perspective. But the second you bought Bethesda, the world understood that meant Redfall is now an Xbox game. Starfield is now an Xbox game. If Starfield is good, it means Xbox did good. If Starfield is bad, it means Xbox did bad. It doesn't matter if they were 12% through the development process when Xbox bought them or 98% of the way through the development process when Xbox bought them. At the end of the day, people are going to look at it and say, that's an Xbox game. Look at Psychonauts 2. That game came out in 2021. It was probably 80% done or something like that when Xbox bought Double Fine, the developer. And we know how the story goes. You know, Tim Schafer and the Double Fine team said that basically Xbox threw a bunch of money and said, take your time. And they said, well, with this extra funding, we can make the game even more robust than it initially was. There's no denying that what we got with Psychonauts 2, which is a great game, by the way, was a great game because Double Fine did a really good job making that really great game on their own. And the thing that helped them from Xbox was Xbox said, here's even more money and even more time. Go do what you got to do. And that's why Psychonauts 2 is a great game. But for better or for worse, Psychonauts 2 is now associated as an Xbox game because it came out at a time where Double Fine was owned by Microsoft. And Double Fine's an Xbox Game Studios first-party team, right? Even though the game was majority made outside of Xbox's leadership, without their ownership, even though the game was crowdfunded, even though the game is on PlayStation, it's still going to get associated as an Xbox game, for better and for worse. And if you don't know that as Xbox, you're fucking crazy, man. And so, yeah, in the case of Psychonauts 2, it worked out because the team knew what they were doing and they made a great game, so nobody questions it, right? But in the case of Redfall, the team didn't make a great game, and maybe they needed a little bit more of a guiding hand. And as Xbox, you have no excuse. You get zero excuse for not knowing that this is our game. This game is a reflection. You know, Redfall is a reflection of Xbox. It's a reflection of Game Pass. The same way Halo and Forza and Gears of War affect what people think of our brand, Redfall does the same thing. It doesn't matter if we bought Bethesda 20 years ago or 5 minutes ago. It's like it's part of our brand. So for them to come out and be like, we acknowledge that that's an important part, but like, motherfucker, you bought Bethesda a couple years ago. So you should have had the day one when that thing was done. You should have had people from Xbox, producers from other teams and such coming over to Arcane and be like, what are you guys working on? Okay, Arcane's got Redfall, Bethesda Game Studios got Starfield. Okay, Machine Games is working on Indiana Jones project. And you have your professionals and your experts come in, and I get it. You don't want to micromanage. You don't want to destroy the culture. I think it's admirable and cool that Microsoft's approach is kind of like, yeah, we want ZeniMax to continue to keep their culture and their identity, and we want, you know, these teams to continue to like be able to do what they want to do without feeling like Xbox bought them and then became a dictator. I get it. They got burned with Bungie back in the day. They don't want to be that Xbox, but it's a balancing act, man. You got to be a little of column A, a little of column B. You can't just be all hands off, laissez-faire. You guys, here's a bunch of money and time. Go make a game. Have a great time, kids, and be all hands off, and then be shocked when they come back with bullshit. That's why Halo Infinite was fucked, is because you guys didn't have the appropriate people in charge making sure that game was done right. And you were hiring little contract workers and poorly managing the production timeline, and we ended up getting a beautiful mess of a Halo game. And so the same thing kind of happened here, where I feel like Microsoft bought Bethesda long ago enough to where there's no excuse for why they didn't bring their producers, their overseers, their time project management, whatever guys over to the guys at Arcane to look at it, to play the game every month or every couple months and be like, let me see your current build of the game. How's the game coming along? Okay, guys, the AI sucks. Okay, guys, there are not enough enemies to fight. Okay, how is this a multiplayer game when there's not enough enemies to fight? Guys, why are the monsters' hands so big? Guys, why is there odd gamer score in this game? So where were your guys to do that? You're Microsoft. You have unlimited resources. What is the excuse? The brand is so important. You can only fuck it up for so long and damage it so many times. It really does matter. The reason people laugh at Xbox and they don't subscribe to Game Pass or buy an Xbox or whatever is because shit like this happens way too often. What is the excuse, man? Halo is like your cannot fuck up, cream of the crop, top franchise, the thing that made you what you are today and gave you a reason to exist. How do you fuck that up? Same thing with Redfall. You don't get the convenient excuse that like, oh, maybe we should have been a little more hands-on and putting some of our talent in charge of like kind of guiding the ship a little bit. It's like, no shit, dude. I'm not saying that Xbox needs to go install some fucking Nazis in all these studios they acquired to be like, no, it must have Master Chief in it, and it must do this and that. Like, no, of course, let the creatives be the creatives. I like that is the kind of the kind of culture they want to instill at their studios. But also, it's like, you got to ask yourself, what does it mean to be a first-party Xbox game? And right now, I don't understand what the fuck it means for half these studios, because I like Redfall. I like it more than most people do. There's nothing about Redfall that feels like an Xbox game. When you boot up the game, it doesn't even say Xbox anywhere on the screen. It has the most generic third-party boot-up screen. Like when you're playing a first-party game, a true premium first-party game, like Halo or like Last of Us on PlayStation or something. When you boot up the game, it's like the developer's name, the publisher's name, beautiful AAA, highly polished, beautiful UI start screen, right? It's like 343, Microsoft Game Studios, Halo Infinite, press start. This game, it feels so much like Xbox had nothing to do with it. Like, it was just the most third-party licensed property thing ever to be put on Xbox. Like, it could have been put on Switch, GBA, Nokia phones, and Xbox all at the same time, this game. You boot it up, and it's just like, here are all the engines we use, here are all the licenses we use, here are the copyright claims, or the copyright notices, here's this developer, here's this support developer, here's Bethesda, no Xbox to be found, here's a really janky start screen menu. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like, these things are all, it seems so small, but these things all add up, This is a little example of what I'm talking about. Just such a minuscule example, but it matters, because when you boot up a game like Forza Horizon 5 or Gears 5, it has that premium feel from the second you hit go, when it's doing the splash screens with the developer name and everything on it, where it's like, this is a AAA game. They don't need to show the licenses of the engines of this, because it's a first-party game. It's all published by the guy that makes the console. It's the same. It's all the same family. And it has that premium feel. Redfall doesn't have that. Redfall's like, here's the fucking logo for the Havoc engine, and here's the fucking copyright 2021 when we had trademarked this name, and here's the fucking this logo and that logo, and there's nowhere that says Xbox anywhere on this. And it's like, I'm just supposed to accept this as first party, and like your initial impression is just like, here's literally any other game, but I guess it's owned by Xbox. And I know, you can make fun of me for like getting on Redfall for something as silly as just like the startup splash screens and stuff, but all that shit matters. Like, this is your game. This is a direct reflection of Xbox's first party output. And right now, Xbox's first party output looks like they got some good smaller games that really appeal to almost nobody, like Pentiment. They botched Halo. Forza was good, but racing's niche. They fucked up Redfall. They had 0 games to talk about last year. Hope Redfall's good, right? Like, it's not a good look. And so I appreciate the candor in addressing this, but at the same time, I'm like, no. This is my line. What Phil Spencer's saying here about being more hands-on from the moment they acquire these studios and like their games and these teams being a reflection of Xbox, that's my line as the stupid no-name podcast commentator sitting in his boxers bitching and moaning about the thing Phil Spencer said on Kinda Funny last week. That's my job. Your job was to instill this mentality 3 years ago or 2 years ago or whenever the fuck you bought Bethesda. So why are you reading my mind after the fact? This makes no sense. Everything here is wrong. So again, it's like, I love and appreciate the candor, but like, what the fuck kind of quote is that? It's crazy that he's talking like that. This is what I'm talking about. Like, you gotta watch this interview. It's fucking nuts. But yeah, he's like talking about like, we can get guys from this team to help with this. Maybe the guys from the coalition that got experience with Unreal Engine, so they could help with engine work. It's like, yeah, absolutely, man. That's exactly what you should have been doing. So they promise better things going forward. They promise that there is a lot more of that kind of hands-on, more curated approach with Starfield, presumably because it's a much more important game. It's a much bigger game, but also because it was a little earlier in its development cycle when Xbox acquired Bethesda. And so there's a little more they could have done from kind of ground zero, so to speak. But again, it's all talk until we see the actual final product. So I just think that's kind of crazy. But that's the first part. Let's talk about Redfall. Let's talk about this other topic I titled Delivery of Titles, Managing of Teams, where I wrote some other notes kind of tying to what we just talked about a little bit, where Phil Spencer goes on talking about how we have to be transparent about what we are showing, mentioning Redfall previews on PC. So anyway, so he kind of alludes to like, hey, we did that media preview about a month ago where we invited some YouTubers and IGN and people like that out to come and play Redfall for a couple hours. And they were all playing on PC builds running at 60 FPS. And so that's why some people came back saying, I don't know, this game doesn't seem too great. And some people are like, hey, the game seems like it's probably pretty good. And he's like, yeah, we need to be more transparent about that, like letting them know at that point in time, because we knew the game was running at 30 FPS on Xbox. We didn't say anything. None of these people asked us, and then they come back and tell the story to all their fans, like, hey, viewers, listeners, readers, whatever, here's what I played of Redfall. Here's why it's promising, but they're withholding this information that Microsoft knows about. So he talked a little bit more about being transparent about that. Again, it's one of those things that's like, yeah, man, don't act like you're just now learning that lesson. You should have always known that, but okay. And then he goes on and says, quote, when you buy a team of people view them as first party, this should have gone earlier, but I'm going to read it here because I have it written anyway. When you buy a team, people view it as first party, and we need to improve on engaging production, whether they're midway through production and they become part of Xbox, or they're at the end. We didn't do a good job of engaging with Arcane Austin and left them to go work on a team. So I mean, yeah, you just can't have the resources Xbox has, that Microsoft has, and be as big as they are, and then just have this excuse. Like you got to go get the right people to kind of lead these projects. Be checking on these teams regularly, playing the games as they're progressing along development, and saying, here's what's working, here's what's not working, here's what we need to focus our efforts on. Because this is the same issue we ran into with Halo. It's just like, where is the proper management of these studios and of these project timelines? It's just so out of whack. Who is in charge of this shit? Who is in charge? I just don't get it. So for them to act like this is an epiphany now, when it's something that we've all been talking about and complaining about for years, it's inexcusable, man. So next, let's talk about, well, actually, no, I have another quote here. So they're talking a little bit about last month, and Phil Spencer's like, yeah, we didn't deliver on our roadmap last year. We had a 12-month plan for all these games. We absolutely didn't deliver on all those games. And so he's going on and on about that. And he's saying, one of the hosts was asking about, like, what's the plan with, like, Avowed, Perfect Dark, Everwild, Fable, State of Decay, Contraband, all these things. And he's going on kind of talking about this, saying that they're going to talk about a lot of those games at the showcase in June in a couple of weeks. So, quote, on to discuss this year's showcase, Phil Spencer says, I'm not going to try to oversell the showcase, because if I was on the other side watching this, I'd be like, hey, after Redfall, I'm going to put my hands on the controller, and that's what it's going to take to prove it to me. So basically saying, I have to play the game for myself to decide, because I can't trust anything you're saying at this point. So he even acknowledges that he's kind of like lost trust with his audience. He says, but that's not what the showcase is. So I'm very enthusiastic about the showcase this year. We're going to announce some things that people haven't seen, some new games, and we're going to give updates on some of the things that we were just listing there. So some of those games: Everwild, Fable, State of Decay, Avowed, Contraband. So, he wants to get to that one game a quarter for Game Pass at a good quality, and things are lining up finally. He says, following COVID, he said, I'm tired of talking about COVID and blaming that, but I can now see that we've got games coming every quarter that I think will surprise and delight the customers. We still have to deliver on the creative. We still have to deliver on the technical. Not every game is going to ship. Not every game that ships is for everybody. We know that. I'm not trying to build the one game to rule them all. We will have different creative takes, and we'll have a diverse portfolio when you think about the stuff that Microsoft Game Studios builds. But I like that. I think that what we're trying to do as Xbox isn't to mimic any of the other platforms out there. We're trying to create our own brand, our own identity, and a diversity of what we build, which hopefully will end up being our strength. But we had to do at quality. We had to do it on time, and we had to show people that they're actually going to see. We had to show gameplay, and I think it's kind of beyond that. Here's the kicker. We have to put great games in the hands of players and nothing else. So that is the most critical thing he says, and we'll circle back to it at the end. We have to put great games in the hands of our players. There's nothing else. But yeah, he's going on saying, I think we're finally through all the kind of gunk up following all those big delays that COVID brought on. Sorry to have to bring that up, but it is what it is. It's affected things in such a catastrophic way. But he's saying he's confident that they're reaching a point where they're going to start having a big game every quarter, and that, hey, not every game is going to be for everybody. And I actually agree with him and like this about Xbox. This is one of the things I vastly prefer about Xbox to a lot of the other people out there. And no disrespect to PlayStation, clearly they are the best at what they do, and they do a great job. But with PlayStation, it's like, did you like The Last of Us? You're probably going to like Ghost of Tsushima. Did you like the Ghost of Tsushima? You're probably going to like Horizon. Did you like Horizon? You're probably going to like, Uncharted, whatever. Because all their games, there's a lot of sameness, right, in their first party output. But Xbox is going to, what he's basically saying is, we're not afraid to be like, here's Forza. I know not everybody likes Forza, but don't worry. Next up is Minecraft Legends. I know not everybody likes Minecraft Legends, but next up is Starfield. And, it's just, there's always something for everyone, and everything can be very different from one another. But I like that. I want Xbox to have that diversity in their portfolio where it is like they have racers, they have shooters, they have RPGs, they have tactical games, they have everything, because that shit's fun. It adds more flavor, adds more variety. Even if it means that you don't end up really caring about everything first party, that's fine. It just means that Xbox's first party gets to be a lot more diverse. I just hope that there is something that can tie all these games together to where you feel like there's something authentically Xbox about it. Think back to the 360 days. You got Forza Motorsport, you got Forza Horizon, you got Halo, you got Halo Wars, you got Gears of War. You think about, you got Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. You got Mass Effect. You got games like this. And it's like, not all these games are, I could see why a guy that likes Halo might like Gears of War, but I don't know, man, the guy who likes, I don't know, Elder Scrolls Oblivion, which was like a second party game, basically. Well, not a second party. It was a third party exclusive for a long time, or something like that. I can see how that guy might like Mass Effect, but maybe he isn't all that into Forza, or maybe he isn't all that into Halo or something like that. And it got to a point where it was like, there's enough diversity and variety, while at the same time, they all kind of felt like Xbox games. Whereas nowadays, it's like, I don't care about Age of Empires. I don't care about Flight Simulator. They're cool tech demos. But like, man, I need to know that like a game is an Xbox game. And when I play Redfall, there's nothing about it that feels like an Xbox game. It feels like a budgety, not quite there Bethesda game, because that's what it is. I played Psychonauts 2. It doesn't really feel like an Xbox game, but maybe a little bit better. So they got to work on that. They got to work on finding that through line. And I'm not even sure that I really have the answer as to how they do that. But keep that quote in mind. We have to put great games in the hands of our players. There's nothing else, because it's going to tie into the end. So getting into that end, we talk about the future of Xbox, where the bullet points I want to get into are where he talks about the console being the core of Xbox. This is really important that he mentioned this. It made me really happy to hear, because it does seem like there's a lot of love given to streaming and PC and all this, but like, let's make sure that Xbox stays first and foremost about the console, because that's the bread and butter, and that's where your hardcore base is. So focus on the console. So he does say that. He says the console is the core of the Xbox business. There's no doubt about that, but they need but they need to meet players on all screens, developers do, so that they can play games anywhere. So he's talking about why they want to expand, but also, yes, the box is the most important thing. And then he says that this summer, also just as a side note, they asked him some rapid fire questions, and he does say that, yes, for sure, this summer we will learn about whether or not Starfield will be 30 or 60 FPS on Xbox. So fingers crossed on that one. I don't have high hopes for 60. But anyway, so let's get into this last series of quotes, and then we can talk about the part I was underlining. So this last set of like conversation here, Spencer was asked about if Xbox had taken its eye off the console market by focusing too much on PC and streaming. And in response, Spencer said that they'd be wrong to think that just building a great console titles could help overtake Sony and Nintendo in terms of hardware sales. So this is where it gets insane. They think building great console titles, video games, they'd be wrong to think that could help overtake Sony and Nintendo in terms of hardware sales. Instead, it has chosen to pursue a different strategy to the Japanese companies, one focused on fulfilling developers' visions of enabling customers to play their games on any screen. Quote, "We're not in the business of out-consoling Sony or out-consoling Nintendo. There isn't really a great solution for us to win at all. And I know that it will upset a ton of people, but it's just the truth of the matter that when you're third place in the console marketplace, at the top two players are as strong as they are and have certain cases a very, very discreet focus on doing deals and other things that kind of make being Xbox hard for us as a team. And that's on all of us, not on anybody else." He added, I see commentary that if you just build great games, and I highlighted all of this, I see commentary that if you just build great games everywhere, everything would turn around. It's just not true that if we go off and build great games, then all of a sudden you're going to see console shares shift in some dramatic way. We lost the worst generation to lose in Xbox One's generation, where everybody built their digital library of games. So when you go on and you're building on Xbox, we want the Xbox community to feel awesome. But this is the idea that we're focused on more than great games on our consoles, that somehow we're going to win some console race. I think doesn't really lay into the reality for most people. Spencer claimed that 90% of people who buy a console every year already own a PlayStation, Nintendo, or an Xbox console, and their digital games library lives in that ecosystem. Quote, this is the first generation where the big games that they're planning were... This is the first generation where the big games that they were playing were games that were available last gen. When you think about Fortnite, Roblox, and Minecraft, the continuity from generation to generation is so strong. I see a lot of pundits out there that kind of want to go back in time to where we all had cartridges and discs, and where every generation was a clean slate where you could switch the whole console share. It's just not that world that we are in today. There is no world where Starfield is an 11 out of 10 and people start selling their PS5. That's not going to happen, end quote. Spencer told Kinda Funny that developers want their games to be playable on as many devices as possible. Quote, we want to have a unique vision because we see what creators want to do. We have this unique vision for that reason. Creators want to build games that can meet players on any screen people play with their friends regardless of what other screen they're on, and the consoles and the core of the Xbox brand, there's no doubt, so we will stay focused on making sure that console experiences are awesome, or that a console experience is awesome. But I know, this is the end of it, but I know some people want to hold us up as just being a better green version of what the blue guys do. And I'm just going to say there's not a win for Xbox in staying in the wake of somebody else. We have to go off and do our own thing with Game Pass, with the stuff we do on xCloud and the way we build our games. I highlighted all of that quote. And let me just tie it back to the last section where I highlighted, we have to put great games in the hands of our players. There's nothing else. And then fast forward back to this quote again. There's no. I see the commentary that if you build great games, everything will turn around. It's just not true if we go back and build great games and all of a sudden you're going to see console share shift in some dramatic way. All right, so Phil Spencer, perhaps the most candid thing he says in the entire interview is that part about the Xbox One generation, because it's absolutely true. The Xbox 360 generation was the last generation where Xbox was truly competitive. It was the most competitive they ever were, and they did quite well. And you know why they did quite well? It's because they had amazing fucking games, and PlayStation fucked up hard throughout that generation. But Xbox came out with great games. And so, listen, I get it. At the end of the day, the problem comes down to that 2013 PS4 Xbox One generation, because what happened is that was the generation where the majority of people switched to a digital ecosystem. You made your Xbox profile, you made your PlayStation Network account, and then your achievements, your gamer score, all the games you bought digitally, all the DLC and expansions, all the in-game transactions, games like Destiny, games like Fortnite, games like Roblox, games like Minecraft, games that you have played all throughout the Xbox One generation that now transfer over to the Xbox Series X generation. That's what he's talking about. People are so invested. They have their friends, they have their progress, they have their purchases made, they have their entire library built. It's the same reason why why people don't jump ship from Steam to Epic Game Store just because Epic Game Store is good. And it's because people are so invested in Steam. That's where everything exists. That's where they spent all their money. So how do you get people to jump from one to the other? It's hard. Steam would have to catastrophically fuck up. PlayStation would have to fuck up so bad for people to jump ship to Xbox. And that's what he's saying. And that's true to a large extent. But I reject this notion that Xbox can't eat into the market share to some extent if they have great games. I agree. PlayStation is probably going to kick Xbox's ass no matter how good the games are. Probably. To some extent. And I say that because in that same generation where Xbox was the most competitive they ever were, the Xbox 360, they were competitive when they had a great console, that came out the gate great and had great games from start to finish of that generation. Xbox 360 was a great generation, save for the Red Ring of Death, of course, which was catastrophic. It was a great generation. PlayStation 3 had terrible messaging at the gate, came out the gate fucked up, way overpriced, no backwards compatibility after a certain point. They took out backwards compatibility. Didn't really have good first-party games until the midpoint of the generation. And then just kind of they fucked that console up for the first 3 years of its life. PlayStation, maybe 2 years, but PlayStation 3 was an absolute mess. And at the end of the generation, when all was said and done, PlayStation 3 still outsold Xbox 360 by not much, but just a little bit. They both sold in the upper 80 million range, I think it was. So PlayStation beat out Xbox 360 by just a little bit, but they still won despite everything that happened. But PlayStation made a comeback, yes, because their brand is big and strong, and because it's big in markets where Xbox doesn't have a foothold, yes. But PlayStation made a comeback because they had great games. They focused on amazing games, and that's what brought them from the depths of hell to beating the Xbox 360. The Xbox 360 came out the gate strong and stayed strong because Xbox 360 had great games. The most competitive we've ever seen these two be was when both sides had fantastic games. So because of that, I want to say I'm not convinced that great games will not help eat into the market share and help Xbox take people away from PlayStation. It absolutely will. I don't think they can turn the tides completely or be the number one brand. I don't think so. I think PlayStation's too good at what they do, and people are too ingrained in the ecosystem. I agree. I don't think Xbox could become number one just by having great games. But I do think they could go from being outsold 2-1 with PS5s and Xbox Series X's to maybe being outsold, I don't know, maybe for every 1.2, 1.3 PlayStation 3 sold and Xbox Series X is sold. That'd be pretty good. If you get to a point where you're only kind of getting outsold by the competition, because you eat up a lot of that core market. I understand there are so many more people with iPhones and Samsungs in their pocket than there are people with PlayStations and Xbox. I understand this idea. I understand there are so many more PCs out there that could game or cloud stream than there are Xboxes and PlayStations out there. I understand this. But the people who are willing to spend big bucks on video games and engage the most hours on video games and take interest in the kinds of games that Xbox and PlayStation create, despite it being a much, much smaller base, that market is on console. So you have to appeal to that base. And maybe Phil Spencer, if this is one of those he could respond kind of things, maybe he'd be like, let me clarify, because I think this is maybe misinterpreted. But he said earlier, we have to put great games in the hands of our players. There's nothing else. And then he said, if Starfield were an 11 out of 10, that still wouldn't make people go out and sell their PS5s. Maybe not. Might make them buy an Xbox Series S, though. Might make them subscribe to Game Pass, if it's great. But I can tell you one thing, people are not subscribing to Game Pass right now for Redfall. People are not buying Xboxes for Redfall because you fucked it up, because you released it when it wasn't great. So don't lean on the excuse that great games won't solve everything. Maybe not solve everything, but it will solve a fuck ton. Because right now, people don't want to subscribe to Game Pass because they don't see the value in the games that are coming to Game Pass. People don't want to buy Xbox because they're just releasing bomb after bomb. You got to instill confidence in people. You got to instill confidence in your base. Right now, what Xbox, it couldn't hurt to put out good games. Because let's put it this way. Let's say someone wouldn't subscribe to Game Pass or buy an Xbox regardless of how Redfall did. Fine. Do you think you might hemorrhage people who are on Xbox by putting out bad games? Do you think maybe someone goes, fuck this, I'm fucking tired of this. I put so much money and so much patience and time into Xbox. They keep letting me down. Redfall is the straw that broke the camel's back. I'm selling my Xbox. I'm buying a PlayStation. I want to go see what God of War is all about. Because they don't keep getting shit on for all their games. Xbox is getting shit on for their games. I can see that. So the quality matters. And the great games and the stream of great games, absolutely matters. So I think I'm a little bit aghast that he said it like this, and maybe he didn't mean it this way, but it came off this way, and it's a really, really, really bad thing to say. And I get it, because remember, let's go back to when we were early days of cloud streaming and all that. Microsoft's approach with gaming now is we can't beat PlayStation at their game. Now we're setting our eyes on Amazon, Google, all that stuff, because the future of gaming is cloud, right? It's streaming. We're very, very far away from that reality being the predominant way people experience games, but we know that that's where things are headed. So that's what Xbox is obsessed with, is trying to get on PC, trying to get on other Game Pass on other platforms, and trying to get on mobile through streaming. That's their number one focus right now, because at the end of the day, if you can capture that market, you got PlayStation is tiny, tiny numbers compared to iOS and Android. So I get it. That's their market. It's cloud streaming. It's all that. But they should be pursuing that, and I'm glad they are. But in the meantime, and for the foreseeable future, I think quite a while, it's still going to be the case that console is the way to go. People are buying their games on consoles. People are subscribing to Game Pass because of what they can play on their consoles. You know, that's what you need to focus on first and foremost. You can do multiple things. You have the resources, your Xbox, but make sure you don't lose sight of the number one thing. At the end of the day, if you fuck up everything else, the number one thing you need to succeed and to have Xbox persist and survive and do well as a brand are great exclusive games for your dedicated gaming devices. Xbox home consoles. It's ridiculous to say otherwise. It's absolutely ridiculous to say otherwise. You're telling me that if Halo Infinite wasn't fucking phenomenal, it was Halo 3 levels of just adoration, the best games as a service we've ever seen, but it's Halo, and people are playing it like crazy today. You go on Twitch, they're not streaming Warzone, they're not streaming Apex Legends, they're streaming Halo Infinite. You're telling me that if that hadn't happened, people wouldn't be like, God damn, dude, I want to get an Xbox. That Halo Infinite looks good. They wouldn't be saying, God damn, I got to subscribe to Game Pass and stream Halo Infinite on my iOS device. They would be saying, I need to go buy an Xbox and subscribe to Game Pass so I can enjoy that Halo Infinite everyone's bragging about. That's what good games do for your brand. So, yeah, they matter. They definitely matter. It's part of the puzzle at the very least. So, I mean, that's basically it, guys. It was a crazy interview. You know, honestly, again, shout out to the guys at Kinda Funny. They pressed a little more than I thought they would, although they definitely didn't go as hard as I wanted them to in some aspects. And shout out to Phil Spencer for being as, you know, raw and candid as he was. I really wasn't expecting that. So overall, it was a really, really enticing interview. It was a really interesting and engaging interview. I mean, you know, for what this means for Xbox gamers, this doesn't instill a whole lot of confidence. I feel like Xbox is in a bad place right now following Redfall's bad launch, and then having the head of Xbox kind of just admit, like, there is no winning. We could never beat Sony. I understand at the end of the day, it's not about winning the console wars with Sony. That's child's play. I get it. But they want to beat Sony. they want to beat Sony. If they can, if there was a clear-cut way to beat Sony, they'd do it. They would go after it. They'd fight. But I think just trying to chase PC and cloud and Game Pass subscription counts, while those things are very important, I think solely focusing on that is not the right way to go. I think you need to focus on the old school, tried and true method of making sure you're putting out phenomenal, high quality, exclusive first party titles. It's the very first thing Xbox needs above all else. So that's it for all that stuff, you guys. We got a couple of important enough news stories important enough to make the podcast, but not important enough to warrant their own discussions. So we'll rattle through those. The Xbox May update is now available. It's rolled out this week. It introduces the ability for players to view their Xbox gamer tags from their Discord friends, which could be helpful. Also includes some new filter options on the pages players can browse on the Xbox's website and on console to make it easier to find games based on price, languages, and accessibility features. Also has some firmware updates for the Elite 2 controllers and adaptive controllers and Xbox rechargeable batteries. So, I wonder if that I wonder if that fixes my Xbox rechargeable battery that's broken. I should try that out. Next up, VGC. Hogwarts Legacy has surpassed 15 million units sold and grossed over $1 billion according to WB Discovery. That's insane. EA, continuing on with the sales success, EA has said that Star Wars Jedi Survivor is off to a very strong start during their earnings call. They said that it's already reached millions of players since it was released on April 28th. Next up, FIFA 23 sales overtook the previous FIFA title within 6 months of being on the market, EA announced at their earnings call. That could be due to the fact that soccer's big right now following previous years' hype from the World Cup, and also because this is the last FIFA game with the FIFA name before it shifts over to EA Sports FC, and also because I don't know, that might be it. But also they announced FIFA 23 will be coming to EA Play and Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscribers next week. So hey, there's a great game to entice people to play some game, get some Game Pass. And then finally, Capcom has announced an open beta for Street Fighter 6, and it will take place later this month. The beta will go from Friday the 19th to Monday the 22nd. So it's available on all Xbox platforms and Steam, or modern Xbox platforms and Steam. Will be available for anyone to take part in, even if they don't have Xbox Live Gold or anything like that. They can still play the beta. So there is that. And then that is going to do it for all of our news this week, you guys. Let's wrap up this kind of long podcast with a couple comments. We read through all the comments earlier when we talked about Redfall, but now we got a couple other comments to get through. Starting out with Mr. Maug, who you know how it goes. You go to youtube.com/Xbox On Podcast or at Xbox On Podcast on YouTube. Hit subscribe while you're there. Leave a nice review on podcast services, but you can say anything you want. You can leave a mean comment. You can leave a nice comment. You can tell me to go Redfall off a cliff for being an idiot and liking this game. You can also tell me that Mtn Dew Summer Freeze is not your squeeze, and I'll be okay with that. But hey, Mr. Maug wrote in, and going back to the Phil Spencer thing, he says, "Hi, Jesse. I hope you heard the interview that the XCast had with Phil Spencer about the issues Xbox is having. It was nice to hear less PR talk than we normally hear from him." Yeah, I agree, and I strongly recommend to everyone absolutely take a listen to that interview. It was really, really good stuff. Good info we got from that. Next up, OG Man writes in. Hey, what's up, OG Man? Writes in about Ravenlock and says, "Yo, Jesse, I've been playing Ravenlock, and I just want to shout it out. Very fun, very short Game Pass title. Hope everyone gives it a go once you get past the first 20 minutes or so. It gets really good. Anyways, keep doing what you're doing, man. I've been missing the Twitch streams. Still got my Mountain Dew drinking emotes." Okay. OG Man, thank you for writing in. I actually have this game loaded up, downloaded, ready to go. I'm actually interested in giving it a go. After Redfall, I am going to give it a try just to kind of see what the game's about. So appreciate the recommendation. Glad to see you're enjoying it. As for streaming, yeah, sorry, man. I want to get back to streaming, actually. I am currently, possibly in the process of buying a home, and it's absolute hell on earth just trying to do some of this stuff right now. So it's kept me very busy, but I have been wanting to get back to streaming very badly. I hung it up for a while because I was trying to focus more and more on just working on some other creative stuff and just trying to have a better balance in life, but I definitely need to do more streams because I miss it. I thought I didn't really enjoy streaming all that much, but the more I don't do it, the more I actually miss it. So I definitely need to do some more of that. But just a fair warning, if I go back to some streaming more regularly, it's going to be a lot of Call of Duty because that's just kind of what I enjoy streaming. So full disclosure. All right, let's talk about Germany. Adam Z's writes in and says, "Products and heart attack, the best taste? We all know. You guys are in the U.S. aren't Veg Pro or what? We have way too much of this shit." I don't know what you mean exactly by that, but what do you mean, Veg Pro? Like into vegetables? I love vegetables. Vegetables are the shit, man. I'm trying to take better care of my body right now. I've been trying to be a little healthier. I love vegetables, dude. Vegetables are phenomenal. When it comes to like good meals, good cooking, really understanding like vegetables and what they do and how they contribute to dishes. I mean, it's the most core, the most core element of cooking is what you can do with vegetables and seasonings and shit, and how well you can cook. I mean, meat's good stuff. Meat is everyone's main attraction. If food was a theme park, steaks and fried chicken are like roller coasters, right? And I get it. Vegetables are like your shows or your kiddie rides and stuff like that. It's not always fun, but it's necessary. It's how you build out a full, well-balanced day at a theme park, is you got to have a little bit of everything. So it's important. Shout out to the vegetables. I love vegetables. Shout out to asparagus. Possibly the best vegetable. Broccolini. Very good shit. You also said, by the way, we have butcher shops that have super good food. You pick what you want, and they put it in a bun fricadelles and flechasie. Oh my God, they're bomb, dude. Come over sometime and don't forget to drink a good Dutch beer, Deutsch beer. I would fucking love to go to Germany. Germany is probably a really good time, and one day, hopefully, I'd like to get over to Germany. There are a lot of places I'd like to get. I've never really been much of anywhere. So I gotta once I finally get into a stage in my life where it's like I own a home, you know, I'm kind of settled into where I live. I'm a little further along in my career. Then I'm gonna start focusing on doing some travel. But right now it's just trying to get my footing. Okay, but I'd love to. No offense. First country I want to visit, Japan, no doubt. Japan. Got to go to Tokyo Disney Sea. Got to go eat some dank-ass Japanese food. Got to see Tokyo. Japan's my number one. If we're talking Europe, again, no offense, I've always wanted to see Spain. I think Spain's the country I've always been most interested in. I want to, ever since the Cheetah Girls did it, all the way back in 2008 or whatever, I've really wanted to go see Barcelona. So gotta make it out to Spain one of these days. But yeah, man, Germany would be fucking great. Good cars, good engineers, good food. Yeah, I'm down for it. I'd love to go to Germany. All right, let's talk about some family write-ins. Our last two comments. Cronky wrote in and says, "How dare you? Deathloop is a 500 out of 10. It's a classic example of how a true masterpiece gets ignored because gamers like Call of Duty. What the fuck is wrong with you?" Well, what's wrong with me is Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War is a better game than Deathloop. Fucking fight me. And then my mom wrote in and says, "The ice cream machine at McDonald's here in Kentucky is always broken." So, yeah. As I said last week, the ice cream machine's broken no matter where you are. That's just how it happens. God hates us all. So, yeah. All right, guys. So, that's it for the podcast. It's a little uneventful, I guess, on the comments. They're a little light on the comments. Not much commentary coming from me, but I think I've talked enough. I've talked your ear off enough for fucking 2 hours here. But, yeah, I encourage you guys to go watch that Kind of Funny XCast interview with Phil Spencer. It's good stuff. Thank you all so much for listening. I look forward to hearing your responses to the Phil Spencer interview. Maybe you guys are playing Redfall, got some additional opinions on it. Love to hear about that. But guys, I mean, we're gearing up. We're 1 month away. We're 1 month away from that Xbox showcase. I'm really excited for it. In the meantime, I'm gonna check out some Season 3 Reloaded of Modern Warfare 2. Maybe get into some Ravenlock. But first, I gotta finish Redfall because I'm enjoying it still. But you guys have a great week. Take care. Be safe. Be well. Check out, watch out for your blood pressure. It's important. Keep that shit under control. Eat a healthy diet, and then sometimes treat yourself and drink some Mountain Dew. Play some good games. Pet your kitties. Kiss your kids on the forehead. Tell your family you love them. But also, go outside. Tell your car you love it because otherwise it will break down on you, and then you'll have an expensive car repair, so you got to not jinx that shit. Also, check out the Google Pixel Fold. It was just announced. It looks very cool. I wish I had $2,000 laying around to buy one, but that's not going to happen. Shh, don't listen to what I'm saying, Surface Duo. I still love you most. But yeah, power your dreams. Play some Xbox. Yeah, and Chinese takeout sounds good.
Yes, that's right.